can at least mess around and just chat.
Let's get my phone out. Are you using your phone, Jesse, to do this on Skype?
I am, yes.
So you're going to struggle to read messages, aren't you?
No, I have an iPad up. So basically, I'm using my phone on Skype, but when it comes to messages, I have my iPad, which I'm going to have on the on the chat, so I can see whatever these weirdos say.
It's because last time weirdos. It's because last time I did it, I just completely forgot to even ask anyone anything in the chat. So
yeah, I'll pay attention to that, and I'll keep them involved. I'm gonna have it literally right in front of me, and I want to have it up so I can see what you have on your screen, so that I can say, look, scroll down a little bit or whatever if you're on the text of the bill or whatever.
Right. Well, just to let you know, you'll have you just have a minor lag, so it might be like 10-15 seconds. The stream's running. I just can't even find it on my phone now.
Oh, it's gonna be that lagged.
Not that lagged. I mean, I don't know. It could be 10-15 seconds. I'm not too sure, Jesse.
Well, it's going to be that.
Oh, there you go. Did you hear that then? It's going to be that. So.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Oh, it's not too bad. Right, well, I'll tell you what. I've come off it. I've gone onto the main Twitter page now from that. So a few people come in.
Let's see. Post in the Telegram, I guess.
Do you like 69ers? Ashley said. He's one of our Telegram, yes, so he obviously knows you very well. Just a dad, hello. God, how corny.
Sorry, what did you say?
No, he's someone of these people in the chat. He's called Just a Dad. Just greet him in, Jesse. Do him a little greet. I've not done it before, ever. What did Suburban Crypto say? Yeah, so just if people are listening, struggling to get over Simon at the moment, so it could just be me and Jesse. But Jesse's got all the knowledge for the US anyway, so that's the important thing, innit, Jess?
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll be fine.
I'll tell you what I can do here on the screen for everyone who's watching. This is what we're going to be covering. So I've obviously covering the US regulations and laws. So we're going to get Jesse to talk a little bit about the token taxonomy, the Volcker rule, US laws and regulations, the structure of how bills are. I mean, I don't even know if they call a bill. Am I right saying that, Jesse? Presenting a bill to sort of Congress or. What we're going to do anyway is we're going to really understand the American sort of structure, because it's a little bit backwards. If you compare it to the UK, the way that we can push things through Parliament, it's a little bit more complex for the US. So obviously, heavily dependent on regulations. It'd be a good insight from Jesse to actually understand, maybe how long it could take. Maybe worst case scenario 2 years. I don't know, but this is what Jesse's going to go into. We've just had a new bill presented, bill to promote fair and transparent virtual markets. I think this is more to do with preventing anti-money laundering, like wash trading, all this stuff. I'm not too sure. Again, we'll have a little touch up on that. We did a video on saving America's Internet of Value. Probably have a little touch up about that. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to be covering, but I think it's stuff that's not been covered, me personally, in the space, not into extent detail. I mean, obviously everyone's probably read the articles and probably skimmed over the bills, but I think it'll be good to actually understand it thoroughly through Jesse, who's one of our Telegram members. So do you want to do like a little introduction, Jesse, or would you like to remain anonymous so that you don't get all these weirdos trying to follow you?
Yeah, I'll give a bit of an introduction, and it'll also give me the ability to give a disclaimer. As a lot of people in our Telegram know, I'm an attorney in the United States. I'm not really going to say where. I'm not going to say what kind of law I practice. A good portion of, a small portion of my law does involve cryptocurrency itself. But, as y'all know that I'm a lawyer, I have to give you a bit of a disclaimer anyway. The important thing to know is I'm not a con law expert. We're going to talk about constitutional law. We're going to talk about some securities. I'm not a securities expert. I've studied enough of this. I've looked into it, but everything that I say, it's mostly an opinion. It's not going to be legal advice. Also, for anyone who kind of knows constitutional law, knows security laws, knows things like the Investment Advisor Act, things like that, I'm going to be oversimplifying everything. So it's not really gonna. If you know it really well, you might say, hey, he's not really explaining it right, or he's kind of cutting things out, cutting out exceptions. It's just because I think the easier I make it, the easier it is to understand it. So a little bit of what I say might be inaccurate, but at the end of the day, it's still true.
Well, that's a lovely introduction, Jess.
It's not really an introduction at all, really. But if you want to find me, come to our Telegram group, and
I think it's good that you've decided to make it simplified, because obviously some of the terminology and the way that stuff is sort of listed in these documents, it does sort of like, it's hard to consume for the everyday normal man, if you want to call it that. So it's good doing that. Simon, have you just joined us there?
Well, if I've pulled out of the multi-story car park, if you can hear me, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. That's fine. Just a quick...
I think he's driving right now. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, Simon's just driving, but he's come to join us anyway. Because we did the last live stream. And... Go on, what you trying to say there, Simon? What you trying to get out, you?
Jesse tried to kill me.
Jesse what? Sorry, tried to kill you.
Jesse tried to kill me if I didn't join. He said he was going to hunt me down.
Oh. Right, so we've got everyone who we need in this live stream chat. So I don't know if you've missed it, Simon. I've just done a little introduction for Jesse. I'm just going to run straight into the first topic that we're going to cover, which obviously is the token taxonomy, which was issued in December 2018. I think it had to be refiled for whatever reason. Obviously, I think Jesse will go into this, but it's been reintroduced. Jesse's going to cover exactly what this means, why is it important, and exactly why it's needed. So. The microphone to you, Jesse.
Yeah, okay.
To me, Jess. Come on.
What'd you say, Simon?
Talk dirty to me. Come on.
Oh, God. I have to say, Kurt, before I get into this, it's kind of a small, funny story. I think I told you this, but my dad is the one who got me into love for crypto, and he showed me a video a while ago. I think it was your first 2-hour video. And I told him, I don't want to listen to this. This guy's crazy. You sounded insane.
Hey, Jesse,
but
I went through a bad walking life during mid-2018, because when all this information is new to you and raw, it can really damage you mentally, because you're looking into that much stuff. Jesse, what I'm trying to say is, I question my own sanity many times.
Yeah.
Honestly,
if you're trying to tell everybody live on TV or the internet that you weren't damaged before 2018, you're a liar.
Fuck off, Simon. Fuck off. But obviously the days of your girlfriends looking at you, rolling their eyes, thinking, "What the fuck am I with here?" But anyway, continue, Jesse.
So anyway, my point was my dad will be listening, so I'm going to be a little bit tame, Simon. Anyway, so
when I said talk dirty to him, I just meant like the facts. I like the facts.
Oh, it's okay if laws turn you on, that's fine. All right, so token taxonomy, as Kurt mentioned, it was introduced in 2018, and a lot of people thought, introduction meant that it was passed. Introduction meant, good things. Everyone was tweeting Trump, say, hey, Trump, sign this. That's not exactly how it works. So first, the important thing to know with Congress is they serve 2-year terms. Well, not exactly, but there are 2-year terms for congressional records when it comes to bills. If a bill is, the term started in 2016, it ended in 2018. When 2018 ended, 2017 it started, sorry. When 2018 ended, anything that hadn't been introduced but wasn't passed gets kicked out the door. It has to be reintroduced in 2019. That's just the way it works. But when you look at the Token Taxonomy Act, it's important because in America, we kind of have a controlled chaos. There's a lot of different legal structure. There's a lot of things going on at once. And there's a lot of states trying to pass different things. But at the end of the day, it's federal law that really rules it all. It's in all honesty, when it comes to cryptocurrency or digital assets or anything like that, while we have laws that kind of address what financial institutions can do, what banks can do, we don't have anything that really applies to cryptocurrency, because when these laws were passed, they didn't really cover. They didn't know that cryptocurrency was going to happen. They didn't know that digital assets were going to happen. They didn't know the word digital token was going to happen. So I think that the way we can go through this is maybe going through the act. It seems like Kurt has it pulled up. So Section 2, the Securities Act of 1933. A lot of people here, they talk about, is XRP, is a virtual currency, are they securities? We can talk in a little bit, we'll talk about why that matters. But for the purpose of this act, the thing you want to know is that we don't want it to be a security. If it's a security, that means bad things. And we will talk about that in a little bit. But for the sake of this act, when you look at Section 2, it specifically outlines, what a digital token is, what a digital unit is. y'all can make your own opinions on in looking at this. But, I think Simon and I talked a little bit about this. When you look at the definition of digital token, there's especially one, that really, really fits the mold. And that's XRP. What do you think about that, Simon?
Hello? What?
Are you driving, Simon? Did you lose signal then?
No, I didn't. He said that one stuck out, it was XRP, and I missed the last 8 seconds of what he was saying.
Yeah, so what I was saying was when you look at the Token Taxonomy Act, when they define digital token, while there's definitely other cryptos that will apply, the important thing that I've noticed is the one that really fits the mold the best, at least in my mind. I don't know all of the cryptocurrency out there, but XRP really, really fits into the definition of digital token.
I think the UK and the US are going to lean in the same way on this. I think what they're trying to do is define the actual tokens themselves by their use case.
Yeah.
So instead of calling it just a currency or a commodity or a utility and it's really important that because it's at the very beginning, they need to get it right at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
So they haven't got 2 chances, 3 chances, 4 chances. And I think that's what, the token taxonomy, as well as the UK crypto, I think they're all leaning on how they're going to actually classify these tokens. Because you've got something that's happening in the States now, which is where Wyoming is classing it as an actual currency. And other states don't believe it's a currency. New York, for one of them, they're just completely different to everybody else as well. And as you said earlier, it's federal law, but I think they need to actually club together, which is why it's the federal, which is why it's important for Congress to actually say, this, it is a utility. So if it serves this purpose, it's a utility. If it serves this purpose, it's a currency. If it serves this purpose, it's a commodity or a security token or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, the Wyoming law is great. It doesn't do everything you want it to do. It's a great start. Everyone's a little bit too excited about it. At the end of the day, if a federal law comes out and it's in opposition to the federal law, that Wyoming law won't apply anymore. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But, I think the important thing to note about the first paragraph in here is pretty much it carves out an exception to security. And that exception is a digital token and a digital unit. And, without going into the words, in my opinion, XRP, and this isn't a legal opinion, this is my personal opinion, XRP would fit into this. And a lot of other crypto would too. And, why that's important is because, like I said, we'll talk about why you don't want to be a security in a little bit. But for now, you just need to know you don't want to be a security. And right here, we have a law that says, whatever fits into this digital token classification isn't a security. It's important to note that, we've heard a lot about this law being introduced in February. Some people said February 14th. That's not guaranteed. But even if it is, what's presented might be different than what you have in front of you today because, they're reintroducing it. They've done some work. They've talked to some people. And we might be looking at a completely different bill. I feel like the bones are going to be the same. There's going to be a lot the same. There's probably going to be some changes, though.
While we're on the security point, and before we move on, are we going to later discuss the fact that technically Ripple isn't liable because of the date that the court case was filed under the current securities law?
If you want to, you can talk about that now. I feel like maybe we can get into that in a little bit.
I think it's perfect. So it's basically, I think for people who don't understand what he's saying, obviously, once it surpasses a certain time frame, then obviously they're not liable for their actions in the past. Am I correct saying that? Just for people who didn't really sort of get the gist of what Simon was saying. Because is it correct if, so for example, if it's been past 5 years, can they not be found guilty for an offence because it's overlapped a certain time? I think I read something like that, so I think it's definitely something to.
It's very similar. Basically, the law with the Securities Act at the moment states that after the initial offering, if 2 years passes and no sort of claims are filed or new suits are filed, then that claim doesn't fall within. Jesse will explain it better, but that's the kind of gist of it.
Yeah.
No, I think Simon's got it. I don't think we need to go too much deeper into it because we're just going to confuse people. But I think Simon pretty much just explained the gist of that. I don't think it needs to. I don't think we need to go that much deeper into it unless people really want to. But
No, we won't go deep into it. So bottom line is the current court cases that are pending against Ripple, technically they're not actually legal because they were filed after 2 years after the initial offerings. So everything that's going on at the moment, technically they could just turn around and null and void it. And with the legal team that they now have got, if it comes down to it, that will be the defense that they take.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I'm not sure this is going to go to the end. I think they might even end up settling out of court. I'm not really sure. A lot of stuff doesn't go to court, to be quite honest. A lot of things settle. And you know, for whatever reason, depending on the judge, a judge can even lax, you know, they can lax deadlines and things like that, filing deadlines. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is possible that they do that. But
one thing I don't know about the US law, if Congress pass a ruling, do the current pending lawsuits, are they all automatically dismissed?
I wouldn't imagine so, because it's really going to depend. I mean, let's say that they pass a law and they include like a provision that goes backwards and says, you know, this applies 10 years prior, then you know, then I think, you know, Ripple would have a good argument. But I don't think that you can, you know, to be quite honest, I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty certain that it goes by the law at that time.
So all they'll do is they'll go to court and then they'll argue the defense that Congress deem it not a security and it falls under this and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and to be quite honest, even if they rule it to be a security at that time, I think it's pretty clear it's not a security now. So it really, you know, it will only have an effect when it comes to FOMO or, you know, the retail side. But when it comes to this, it actually being used, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Because, you know, my personal opinion, it's not a security. I know a lot of experts who weighed in on this and have said that they don't believe it to be a security right now.
I don't view it as a security, but that's just me.
But you know, regardless, some kind of act like this is gonna pass, and it's, you know, XRP, Bitcoin, Ethereum, things like that. They're not going to be securities going forward, at least in my opinion.
Fantastic. Case closed. Moving on.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Right. So just before we do, are you going to continue with the token taxonomy, Jennifer? I'm presuming.
I think it's a good thing if we actually scroll down. If you move down to
So where now we're looking?
Yeah. So Section 3 just has more to do with the Securities Act. It's not really important, but when you go down to Section 4, Investment Advisors Act, if you see that, it's at the bottom of your screen right now. Yeah. So this is a hidden gem in this act that people haven't really paid much attention to, because they just see, oh, no security, I'm so excited. But there's some other good stuff in this act. And, you know, something that people don't realize when it comes to, you've probably heard a lot about Fidelity potentially offering some kind of crypto exchange. When it comes to investment advisors, they have some strict requirements, and we can go into that in a little bit, but pretty much one of those strict requirements is that they, there's a lot of exceptions, but depending on, you know, what the asset is classified at, whether it fits into the Investment Advisors Act of 1940, you know, let's say that XRP or a cryptocurrency fits into it and Fidelity wants to offer it, they need to have some kind of third-party custodian. It could be themselves if they follow SEC rules, but, you know, the rules themselves don't really carve out what is needed to be a cryptocurrency custodian or a digital token custodian or digital, you know, whatever terms they end up using. It's not really carved out in the law. No one really knows. So even if you could have even if it was legal to custody this, you know, even if it was legal for Fidelity to have some kind of exchange or whatever, you know, where they're investing for institutional clients, how can those assets be custodied? No one really knows. You know, how do you have to hold them? Who keeps the wallet keys, things like that. So Section 4, Section 5, and Section 6 kind of goes into that. You know, it adds companies that provide custodial services to the definition of a bank. And so when I was talking about custodial services, one of the providers of custodial services for corporations like Fidelity are banks. So if you add a company that provides custodial services into the definition of banks, you might have other types of custody companies like, I don't know, Coinbase or what's the one that David Schwartz and Arthur Britta are working on?
PolySign.
Yeah, PolySign, things like that. You know, if they qualify, they can be custodying assets for a company like Fidelity. And if you look at Section 6, it pretty much even lays out the satisfactory control location requirement. And it says it's fulfilled by protecting a digital unit through public key cryptography and following commercially reasonable cybersecurity practices. Now, those still need to be set out. There's probably going to be more legislation that lays that out. It might be part of those two new bills that were introduced. I can't find any text on them, so I can't really say what they say. I don't know what they say. They probably just are putting together some kind of group of people to look into it.
I think the best reference to that is to watch what people are doing. Because if you look at Circle and a few of the other crypto companies, they have partnered with BitGo. SBI have partnered with a company in Japan for custodial services. So I think, the best thing is just to look at what they're actually doing, because they're obviously partnering with custody providers, so they probably can't do it themselves, as you're saying.
I think Fidelity tried to partner with Coinbase, right?
Because Coinbase has got a license for it.
Yeah, in New York,
But as far as I'm aware, they said that they were winding down their industrial they said they were winding down their custody solution, and so they weren't going to move forward with it.
Yeah, that sounds accurate. But, regardless, they're going to find somebody. Yeah.
Like you.
Like me, you said? No.
Give me your crypto.
I will custody everybody's crypto. Just reach out to me after this, and I promise I'll keep it safe. All right, so Kurt, I think moving on. I think we kind of got that, and we'll take questions later if anyone has any. This is kind of all boring stuff anyway, except for me.
It's not, Jesse. It's not, because especially if you're someone like myself, probably the vast majority of the audience who are probably watching. It's the sort of insights that you can't directly get from articles and stuff. I mean, obviously you can read it and that, but again, like you try to put it down into layman terms really helps out. So are you covered with the entire token taxonomy? Because I've actually got a question to ask you in regards to it.
Yeah, I'm going to zoom through the end of it, and then we can go to it. So you'll see Section 7, individual retirement accounts, investments in virtual currencies. This is just setting the framework so that your 401k, your IRA, whatever you have, Roth IRA, anything, you can invest in crypto, in that kind of a situation. And Section 8, certain exchanges of virtual currency treated as non-taxable exchanges. And there was also in 2018, when this was introduced, there was another bill introduced that totally had to do with just the taxation. It basically had the same language. It was very simple. But there's just some, the whole idea behind this, the certain exchanges and the gain from or sale of exchange of virtual currency that's in Section 9. It's just they're trying to change the law. They're trying to tweak it. They're trying to figure out how they can make it work. If you look in Section 9, basically there's a part that I think says exchanges from crypto to another crypto or token, whatever the words are, virtual currency to another virtual currency that don't exceed $600 are non-taxable events. So that could be huge in, any kind of transfer from, let's say you're going from XRP to USDC back to XRP. It's not really a taxable event as long as it's less than $600. They do aggregate. There's going to be more clear laws for this, but it's interesting that they're trying to do things so that if you're doing some kind of light trading or some kind of transferring movement, exchanging one asset for another, that's not a currency itself, that's not like cash or whatever, it's not specifically taxable. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with all this.
Well, to begin, I mean, like you say, it's definitely a step in the right direction, and obviously the way that you've just explained it, it appears like it will really help in regards to the US, maybe particularly the banks and what they can do with digital assets as a whole, and obviously, like you say, the clarity is what's essential really in this space for it to mature. And to obviously evolve and get that broad adoption without the regulations, you're pretty much pissing in the wind, is what we say over here in England.
Yeah.
But my little question that I wanted to ask you about the token taxonomy, obviously it's been presented now. Well, I know you can't answer how long it's going to take in a time frame.
Yeah.
But if you could give me from one extreme to another, then obviously at least people who are watching can sort of make their own sort of speculative decision based on that.
Of course, yeah.
Has it been reintroduced?
Not that I know of. No, it hasn't.
I didn't think it has.
Yeah. No. The rumor is the 14th of February, but some people base that on Bearable guys. Some people base that on I forget his name, but some guy who's related to the camp of Darren Soto or Warren Davidson. Those are the two main congressmen. who are involved in this. Someone saying that they're seeking the 14th, it makes sense because the government might shut back down on the 15th. But anyway, let's say it gets introduced on the 14th. The one thing that I want, I'm probably going to upset a lot of people when I say this. The one thing I want to say, everyone keeps thinking it's going to happen this way. It will not be passed the same day. Is it possible? Yes, but it's just not going to happen. The fastest bill, to my knowledge, that's ever become a law in the United States was in direct response to 9/11. And that's a very serious issue that happened, obviously. And this bill that was introduced, in response to it, still took a day to go through the House, a day to go through Senate, and then a day to be signed. So it was 3 days. And I'll get into that in a second. But the important thing to know is one of the most, not controversial, but a bill that was caused because of the biggest controversy in my life and everybody not everybody who's alive, but the biggest, most recent controversy that's happened. It took 3 days to pass that bill, so you're not going to see it in the same day. It's just not going to happen. So, an outline of what really happens in Congress and how a law gets passed. It makes me think of for any of the Americans, there was when we were kids, there was this YouTube, or not YouTube. It was like a video. It was Schoolhouse Rock. And it's a video that's kind of like a cartoon that shows how a bill gets passed. So all of you, just look up Schoolhouse Rock. I'm just a bill. Later, it'll probably explain it better than me. But the outline of it is there are two houses in Congress. There's the House of Representatives and there's the Senate. A bill needs to be introduced in one of them. When it comes to financial-like bills, it always gets introduced in the House of Representatives. What happens is, to be introduced, it gets literally someone walks it up and puts it into a basket. When it gets put into a basket, the bill gets read, ultimately sometimes the same day, sometimes next day, and then they immediately send it to a committee. Now, that committee can take the bill and they can do research into it. They can hold hearings, blah, 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 blah. That can take literally 2 years itself. But the thing you need to know is when it comes to all these crypto bills, they've had 2 years of committee research. So anyway, it goes to a committee until someone on the floor, one of the congressmen says, hey, let's bring this up for a vote. They bring it up for a vote in the House. And then if, the majority rules in favor of it, it gets passed in the House. And then what happens is it kicks it over to the Senate. That's not an automatic pass. Most recently, the two bills that were introduced in January were actually passed in the House. And I saw a bunch of internet articles that said it was passed and now it's on the president's desk. That's not true. It goes over to Senate. It goes to the other branch of Congress. Senate now reads the bill, kick it to a committee. It could stay in the committee as long as it wants to until someone on the floor says, hey, let's vote on this bill. They vote on it. If it by a majority, if it passes, then it goes to the president. Then the president has to sign it. He could veto it. There's multiple ways to veto it, but it doesn't really matter to go into what they are. But pretty much goes through one house, then through another, and then to the president. It can take as long as it can. We can go through the next 2 years, and it could never actually even make it to the floor of the House of Representatives, to be quite honest. And if it doesn't, and we go 2 years, once the Congress session ends, once the session ends, it's gone again, just like it was in December. It needs to be reintroduced. Realistically speaking, what time frame do I see? That's impossible to answer, but I can tell you that the most recent bills, there were two that were, or actually I think there's five bills that relate to cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. They were introduced, a couple were introduced January 1st or to the 4th, somewhere early. They just passed the House, so that was a month turnaround to pass the House and then go to Senate. So you could see the same time frame. You could see a little bit quicker of a time frame, and so you could be looking at 2 or 3 months to pass this thing. You could look at three days. It's possible. I don't think it's probable. If I was to guesstimate, I'd say somewhere in the 3 to 6 month time frame before it gets passed.
Right, well, I just want to put a little bit of my own input on that there. Obviously, I appreciate, it's something people should prepare for. It could happen. It could take 2 years. But for myself personally, I've seen a very telling clip from Ryan Zagon where he's addressing in Capitol Hill. And obviously the way that he structured his pitch was, the US need to act now because, other players, other nations around the world are are really embracing this revolution. So it's a funny one, because obviously you look at the likes of like Japan and Thailand, and they're all moving forward with it. And you know, we've got a little touch up on the UK here as well. Obviously, we've just had the Future of Money talk from Mark Carner, where we got our question answered, which I love, Jesse. I was happy about that. But no, but it even seems
I actually don't even know what you just said.
Well, when you read, it's the accent, obviously. It's the thick accent. I did say it happened. I said it was the Future of Money sort of conference for the Bank of England. We had our question read out, didn't we, from Luffy Crypto. So I hope you understood that time, Jesse. You know, because that was.
I did. I got it.
Right. So nonetheless, David read it.
So nonetheless, anyway, it really looks like the UK can sort of, you know, spin this around. We will speak about that a little bit later, but. Do you think that the US themselves will be looking at this in a way of, you know, we need to act now, we need to sort of, you know, maybe accelerate the motion so we can play catch up, so to speak, or do you think that they're just going to keep putting it off and off? I know you've expressed your opinion with the 3 to 6 months as well, but I feel like the US really do need to act. I don't know if I speak for myself when I say that, but
yeah.
Before Jesse answers this, let me add something after.
Go ahead, Simon.
What was that? Sorry.
So before Jesse answers that question,
you're up.
Just remember that I'm not knocking US politics whatsoever. But
it's breaking up a bit.
Yeah, Simon's going out, but I think I know what he's about to say. He's going to say, without knocking US politics, it's a shit show.
Yeah.
It is. It's a real mess. You know, the problem is it's just
much about as corrupt and backhanded as politics goes.
Well, tell you what, Simon, just for your knowledge, you broke up a little bit then, but you landed slap bang on exactly what Jess said that you'd fucking say, so well done with that. So it is a bit of a shit show, if you want to call it that, then, Jess, is the way that I look at it as well, because it shouldn't take... I mean, I suppose it's US law and these are the hurdles that you've got to pass, but, you know, and the people even say executive orders. Now, I know you're not a fan of that, Jesse. I know it's not something that you think will happen, but, you know, it could even get put on the president's lap in an urgency to act. I don't know.
It could.
I may be over-speculating there, but, again, it's just so the viewers can sort of see, you know, did the act, you know, being conservative is the best way forward. That's how I always look at this. Anything else is a bonus.
And an executive order would only be issued if there was a direct threat to America's capital market.
And you know,
agreed.
Arguing on that point, I know it's not relevant yet at all, because, you know, obviously we've not really got a mass enterprise institutional use case for it. But, you know, if Japan do sort of launch the way that a lot of people do think, including ourselves here, and we do really see that sort of again, it's you know, it's a wave of innovation, and the US have always sort of been the leaders. You know, if you look at the .com era, you had all the regulations to embrace it, and they pretty much, you know, monopolise that space. But again, this is more of a worldwide thing, and it's not just limited into the US this time. And for me, it appears that other nations are really moving forward with this.
I think the really important thing is the fact that it's bipartisan, and all this started to happen when Ripple launched the SARS coalition.
I think Simon's accurate. Yeah, I want to taper a little bit of expectations when you hear the word bipartisan, though, because bipartisan could literally just mean one Democrat and one Republican present it. It doesn't mean that they have their party sides. All the time, Republicans introduce bills and Democrats introduce bills that are just, you know, their own, what they want, but their party doesn't want. You know, there's been some crazy bills introduced. With that said, you know, the thing about the U.S. is I do think our legislators recognize that we are getting left behind. You know, so I've watched, unfortunately for me, hundreds of hours of videos in committees of them talking about digital assets, cryptocurrency, things like that, because I just wanted to see who they brought in, who was chairing the boards and things like that, just to see what was being said. And it's pretty clear that everyone recognizes that we're being left behind. I mean, the Democrats now have they created a technology task force. There's a bipartisan congressional committee called the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, I think. Yeah, that's it. And so everyone's getting together, and they're putting all this information together, and they're introducing these bills, and you know, like I said before, we can go over them in a little bit, but there are 5 bills right now in front of Congress and about to be a 6th. So it's clear that they're really trying hard to dump these bills, you know, into Congress. My only concern with it, though, is so the one issue is when it comes to these types of bills, most of them, when I say they get sent to a committee, when in the House, most of them will go to the Committee of Financial Services. And the Dems, since they took the House, they recently appointed a Congresswoman, Maxine Waters, to be the chair of that committee. And she said a couple of times that, you know, she wants to really focus on technology when it comes to finances and things like that. But I can remember watching her in those committees, because she was, I believe she was still part of, she was on the, she wasn't the chairwoman, but she was on the board or whatever you call it. And she was always against cryptocurrency and digital assets. She always had bad things to say. So I'm a little bit worried that anything that goes to her committee isn't going to come back up. But hopefully there's enough, you know, bipartisan support, which there seems to be, to really get her to, you know, realize that there's a legitimate and serious concern of the United States getting left behind.
Yeah, that's my sort of thoughts exactly. You know, you think it yourself anyway, but it's a shame I've not got the clip up. Obviously, I didn't know we was going to cover it like this, but there is a clip of Ryan Zigone. What I'll try and do, I'll try and list it in the description after this live stream. But you should go and watch it. It's about a 3-4 minute clip of Ryan Zigone addressing. I don't know if it's Congress or whether it's in Capitol Hill anyway. And
I think it's committee hearing, but it was great.
I think it was Warren Davidson, wasn't it? I think he was talking at that hearing with Warren Davidson.
I think so too.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar.
I mean, like I say, I'm not 100%. Like you said, there's that much information, you get lost with it all. But what he is saying and the way that he's saying it, with, you know, with the urgency, is probably the best way of putting it. It is an address to say, you know, if you don't act now, you are going to get left behind. And I mean, you see everything that's happening with, you know, with the Saudis, with Japan, Thailand, all these other countries. And like you say, it's not that I'm trying to get a time frame out of you, Jesse, but I think for myself personally, I do think it is something that maybe might be pressed a little bit more than what it has been recently, because when you look at like the SEC granting the ETF, it's just been postponed and postponed and postponed. And what I'm trying to do is, obviously, you said it could be a 2-year period, which it may well be. But it just seems like with the ETF situation, I understand they've got the concerns with manipulation in the market and so forth. But it just does, like, America is lagging as an overall, I think it's fair to say.
We really are. Yeah, and you know, just to add some comedy to this, we have some real good trolls in the chat. Daniel Southern wants everyone to know that I pee while I sit down while I pee.
Yeah, is this one of your friends from real life? Well,
I don't even know.
You know, you're not the only one, Jess. We all do that.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you just have to.
Yeah, you get trolls all the time. So if you see anything that's a little bit disrespectful, you know, you just have to brush it off your shoulders.
No, it's funny. They want you to say liquidity, though. I can't say it like you.
Liquidity.
So you have to
Liquidity.
Liquidity.
Oh, fuck off. Leave me alone. But I'm a common folk trying to sound professional, like I know economics and stuff, and I'm just, you know, I'm not no expert. You know, here we are, I'm sat with a lawyer and sat with Simon.
People don't come to LFC for professional, mate.
No, they don't get it, Simon, you know.
Some crazy fucker from Manchester.
This is also why I can't give my full name, because if my clients heard this, you know, they wouldn't be my clients anymore, I'll tell you that.
Oh, that's a very nice thing.
Just remember, Jesse, I know everything about you.
You do.
Right, so I think I mean, obviously, like you say, we've had a right good talk about that, considering what time it is. But, you know, that's token taxonomy, how long it will take, what it can do, you know, for the US on that side of things. Just a quick one in regards to the conference, The Future of Money, with Mark Carner. They said that UK banks can hold digital assets. Now, there's a rule in the United States called the Volcker rule. I believe, was this issued not long after the financial crisis to prevent negligence again? I'm not too sure, but Jesse will give us a little bit of a rundown and see what limitations this actually holds for US banks and financial services.
Yeah. So, sorry.
The Volcker rule. It's all right.
Oh,
Are we doing Frank Dodd first? Because that'll explain it better.
Yeah, well, if you want to roll it all in, like you say, you know, you two guys are a lot more specialised at this than what I am, but it's just great to have you both together.
I'm very special, but
you are. Oh no, you're very special. You're very special, Simon.
I'm not that special.
In your own wonderful way. No, Jesse, you are. I think you're a very smart guy. You know,
you're more special than me, Jesse, when it comes to the rules
for people.
I'm a different kind of special.
For people who do watch us, Jesse is actually our C3 Nick. is a good way of putting it. He's our anti-hype man. And he crushes FUD every single day, so you know you get all your optimism and enthusiasm leached out of you on a daily. So no, I'm only joking, Jess.
I'm not like Seamus though, but he's the FUD crusher. But no, I'm like a grandpa who's telling everyone to get off my lawn. That's pretty much what I do.
Well, we love you for it. We love you for it. But
yeah, get off my lawn.
So if you want to talk about this, what was it, Frank Dodd? Then I believe it was. Was it wrong?
Well, I'm asking Jesse if he thinks Frank Dodd will lead better into Volcker, because I think Frank Dodd would lead better into.
Yeah, no, I mean, Volcker rule came from, it's part of Frank Dodd, so I think it's important to explain Frank Dodd first. So you can take that.
No, crack on.
You said you were going to do it.
No, you said you were going to do it.
What? Okay.
You said you were going to do it. You said you would ask me questions, which is fine. But if you're going to explain it, then you should explain it.
Well, I'll explain the Volcker rule. You go into Frank Dodd, and I don't think really.
I think Jesse slipped up with his research there, Simon, about this Frank Dodd.
No. I mean, I thought I could have sworn Simon just said he wanted to go into Frank Dodd, and then I'll go into the Volcker rule.
I said, shall we not cover it first?
Okay, that's fine. It's just. Quickly speaking, as Curtis said probably a billion times, everything that's happening here, everything that's happening today has to do with the 2008 financial crisis. Kurt can really go into, he could probably talk for another 4 hours about what happened, and why it was a problem.
4 years,
yeah, 4 years.
Hey, listen, you don't call me the bubble boy for no reason, boys. Go on, Jess. Go on, sorry, Jesse, go on.
The what? Sorry.
No, I said they don't call me the bubble boy for no reason. But I thought I might have said it too fast for you, because obviously you struggle to follow the strong Mancunian accent. So, nonetheless, Jesse, take the mic. Tell me about the Volcker rule.
The bubble boy.
The bubble boy. Yeah. You know what? I'm raring for the financial crisis, mate. I want that. I want it to pop. I want it to pop now. I don't want none of this QE bullshit that they fucking try to reintroduce, mate. I just want it to go right now. So they call me the bubble boy.
All right. So anyway, the I keep calling it the Frank Dodd Act, but I think I was saying that it's the Dodd-Frank Act. Sorry. Basically, because of the 2008 financial crisis, because of what banks were doing, basically they were being bad. Without getting into what they were doing, they were being bad, and our country, needed some kind of answer. We needed a way to make sure that nothing like that could ever happen again. So Obama introduced the Dodd-Frank Act. I think it was introduced in 2009. I don't even know the years, but it took a while to get passed, actually, and it pretty much just
2009, 2010.
Yeah, and it just brought like the most significant changes that we've had to date in financial regulation, specifically when it comes to banks. When you're talking cryptocurrency, though, when you're talking can banks hold cryptocurrency, it's important to note that if it's with their own money, they probably could. I'm not talking about clients' funds. I'm talking about their own money. And that doesn't really get covered by the Dodd-Frank Act or the Volcker rule. But when you're asking, can they put clients' funds into cryptocurrency, the answer is it's really not clear. So part of the Dodd-Frank Act, it was updated in, I think, 2014, maybe. This was Obama as well. This took forever to happen, to be quite honest. There was the implementation of the Volcker rule, and pretty much the point of this was they realized that the Dodd-Frank Act probably wasn't doing enough. They needed to do a little more. So any bank that is FDIC insured, and that's pretty much every big bank, is required to not engage in risky and speculative trading. Pretty much. It stopped them from proprietary trading of what they call financial instruments, and those instruments being securities, derivatives, commodity futures, as well as the option trading with regards to that. So why does that matter? Like I said, with the Token Taxonomy Act, it labels digital assets and digital tokens as not a security. So if it's not a security, if banks want to hold it, if banks want to use it, they don't have to report it, or it's not prevented by the Volcker rule. Now, there's exceptions to the Volcker rule, such as when like a bank is market making, and maybe you could say, look, them holding cryptocurrency, them holding digital assets is actually market making. But the real issue with that is, there's self-attest rules. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of compliance issues. It's just expensive. If you think that it's a security and you think you can hold it as a security, and you decide it's a good idea for your bank to do it in a market-making type of way, you still have to pay a lot of money. So it might really not be worth it. So the real truth is we don't really know where digital assets fall. We don't know if they're securities. We don't know if they're commodities. I know that I think the SEC basically said, not a formal ruling, or even though they don't do formal rulings, not a formal statement. They said that I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are not a security. I think a federal court said that all cryptocurrency is a commodity, so that might make it fall under the Volcker rule. Even if it doesn't, there's another carve out for high risk assets that could be, even if they're not a security, commodity, or derivative, they can be lumped back into the Volcker rule. So the issue isn't that.
And this just highlights the actual need for clarification on what these things are.
Yeah. And that's the thing. The issue is it's not that they fall under the Volcker rule. It's just nobody really knows. And there's so many. When it comes to banks, they have to comply with the SEC. They have to comply with the OCC. They have to comply with the Federal Reserve. They have to comply, if they have their own consortiums, they have to comply with that. There's so many things that they have to do. There's so many concerns. So it's just not worth the risk until it's actually outlined. Yes, you can hold this, or no, you cannot hold this.
Just to clarify a little bit further as well, after 2008, and as you say, when Obama did introduce sort of like the Dodd-Frank Act in 2009, all the rest of it, it actually over-restricted banks as well.
Yes.
So they're in this catch-22 at the moment, because at the moment Trump is actually trying to, he's either trying to get rid of the Dodd-Frank Act or he's trying to heavily change it. And he's been very vocal on this ever since he started his campaign, because he believes that America can't compete in the financial market as much as they could before, because the banks are over-restricted when it comes to sort of CFDs, as well as security trading, as well as all the things that caused 2008. They're still needed investment vehicles, but the banks went too far with them. And instead of keeping it realistic to what they could actually secure with their own assets, then they didn't. They overreached. So, if it wasn't for a government bailout, sort of 70-80% of them would have actually gone bankrupt. I think the only ones that would have actually walked out of it were probably Bank of America and Goldman Sachs, if there wasn't all the bailouts that happened in 2008.
Yeah, and going off what Simon said, Trump is trying to do something. He did pass that executive order 13772, I think is it. And it basically just created a task force to look into what are the issues with the Dodd-Frank Act. And from that, changes have come. There's been a lot of proposed changes, some bigger. We do have the First Amendment in a while to the Dodd-Frank Act that happened last year. And it pretty much said that banks that have, I think, 250 billion and under in assets actually didn't have to comply anymore. So, when I was doing research on that a while ago, an interesting name that popped out was of a bank that fits under the 250 billion under assets is American Express, because they're also a bank. And I know that you've probably heard a lot about American Express with Ripple. I'm not saying anything's going to come out of that. It was just kind of cool when I saw that. But so there are carve-outs. I've seen a lot of legislation in Congress that was introduced last year. I haven't looked this year to change the Dodd-Frank rule, but you
are right, because the other thing that's come out is HSBC's subsidiary bank, which we know has just been announced as a partner of Ripple, and they fall under the 250 billion Act as well.
Oh, so, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
You're seeing the smaller but still the larger banks. You're seeing them that could possibly, nothing's confirmed with them, but they have the ability to compete more as a market maker in a new market.
Yeah.
Right, so I think that was a pretty good rundown on the Volcker rule there, especially that last little bit that Simon thrown out there as well. That's very interesting as well, because obviously if these banks are facing restrictions of whatever sort of kind, then if obviously this thing that you just said, is it HSBC then? Yeah, it was HSBC, wasn't it, Simon?
It's not HSBC.
But obviously it's like a way around the current regulations, isn't it, to a degree?
It's one of their subsidiary banks. It's one of their smaller banks. They've got a couple. They've got First Direct. They've got, what is the name of it? Is it Pharma or?
Honestly, God, Simon, there's that many fucking names going about these days. Mate. I'm forgetting my own, mate. Honestly, I fucking really am.
Oh gosh.
But
yeah, if I could pause for a second, actually, it looks like we're going to get to it. So, Crypto Dave asked about Fidelity, Nasdaq, TD, Ameritrade. I see it on your list. So just so you know,
do that now,
we're going to get to that a little later, Dave. We'll answer that question.
Oh, right, yeah, do it later. Oh, sorry, do it later.
Well, I think we still have a couple of things on your list.
Yeah, we'll do it to that. Well, obviously, for questions in the last live stream, I just turned it off.
Yeah.
It's my first one, so it was a little bit shaky in that. But there will be a round for questions at the end. So if anyone wants to compile a question, then obviously just save it for the end if it's...
Just do you know something as well, right? I view this little chat as three people having a chat. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what people put in the comments after saying blah, 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 blah. If you don't like it, don't watch it. Fuck off.
Simon, those were good comments. They're asking questions. So.
No, but I know what Simon's saying. You do get a lot of trolls. You get a lot of people out there who just...
No, I was actually referring to the last one. People just said it was blah, 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 because it went on and it went on. And, you know, at the end of the day, these things can go on for 10 hours if it's three people having a conversation. It's three people having a conversation. It's people watching that conversation. We're trying to be informative.
Yeah.
You know, that's my stance on it.
In the words of Kurt, if people don't want to watch this, they can fuck off.
Yeah, you can.
That was my best impression. It was terrible.
That was me.
Fuck off.
Fuck off. It's funny trying to hear Americans try to speak Mancunian because it takes a fucking a good month or two to understand what they're saying to begin with. So obviously so we covered token taxonomy, we covered the Volcker rule, we've gone into that.
I think Jesse's got a couple more bits to add on.
Have you got more bits to add on that? Sorry, Jesse.
Do I?
Oh right, so I'm presuming that he's not by that there, Simon.
Okay then.
Right, so moving swiftly on. Right, so when I was speaking to Jesse,
Simon, am I missing something? Is there something that I'm not thinking about?
I don't know. You actually said that you were going to get to Fidelity and thingy in a bit.
Yeah,
but there's a couple more bits that you want to go through first.
That was a question asked in the comments, basically. But we have got Fidelity down as something to speak about. Just in regards of can they actually launch a digital asset exchange right now? But we will go into it. But obviously, so I've just got this little bit here. It's not nothing really informative, but it's just going to enable people to understand the structure because, like you say, it's a very complex sort of legal structure in the United States. So obviously, Jesse, I'm sure you can see what I'm saying. It's just, if you can just sort of briefly break down, your state law, your federal law, executive orders, just those type of nitty gritty things. Because if you're American, I'm sure it's clear as day. But obviously, we are a British channel, so we don't have a fucking clue. Well, we do. If you look into it, you do. But for a lot of people who are in crypto assets, I don't think they'll fully understand the legislation of how difficult it is to actually get laws written in the books, if you want to call it that. So go ahead, Jess, give us a little rundown then.
Of course, yeah. So basically, when I talk about United States law, I like to kind of call it a controlled chaos. And I know I used that before for something else, but it's really what it is. Everything's all over the place. We have a control, we have a system in place, but if you don't know what's happening, it's impossible to find out. So realistically speaking, we have state and we have federal law. So as you know, we have one country, but we're broken up into, numerous states. Each of those states can have their own laws. They can set their own laws, but the important thing to know is that they can't be any more restrictive than federal law. So they can say whatever they want, do whatever they want, but the second that it conflicts with the federal law, that law is no longer valid. So states will create laws, same as how, Wyoming just created a law, and a couple other states are looking into cryptocurrency laws, and they're great. But, if something happens where federal law comes around and basically is more restrictive than them or says something in the opposite of what those states are saying, those state laws are gone. They're thrown out. Once they're challenged, they'll lose in court.
Tell them it's the 14th Amendment, Jess. Come on.
Yeah, it's tied into the 14th Amendment. It is. It's because of the 14th Amendment, which most people know is the amendment that freed slaves. But there was more into that amendment. But pretty much what it said was that outside of all that the slavery things, I don't know why you got me into the 14th Amendment. Outside of all that, the only important thing for this is that states can't be more restrictive than the federal government. So now you have states; they have their laws, but they can't be more restrictive than the federal government. So now you look at the federal government. I do know how many states we have. Daniel Southern. Someone should just kick him out. Anyway, so now you have the federal government, and it's broken into it's three branches. It's broken into the legislative branch, which are the courts that I just talked about. I talked about how a bill becomes a law. the executive branch, which is the president. That's the person who enforces the laws, and the judicial branch, and that's the, you know, our judges, our court system, and they interpret the law. And so pretty much, you know, if law is going to be created, it's going to be created in the legislative branch. With that said, you did mention, and we did talk about how Trump could create an executive order, and he could, and, you know, Congress can't really do anything about it. Now, judges can, if he creates an executive order and it doesn't meet, if it's against the Constitution, you know, if there's no constitutional backing to that executive order, it can be challenged in court. To date, I think only 2 or 3 executive orders have been overturned by the Supreme Court. I might be wrong about that number, but it's something like that. So most executive orders, you know, they're not actually created. You know, a president doesn't actually create them unless he or she knows.
They don't use them like blank checks.
Yeah, they don't use them like blank checks. That's a good way. So basically speaking, you know, federal law is going to trump state law. There are some exceptions to that, but in a general speaking, federal law is going to trump state law. It's going to be created in Congress. Like I said, there's 2 houses of Congress. It has to pass both. I think that's a pretty decent rundown. I probably kind of bounced all over the place.
No, it's perfect, that, because it leads me on perfectly to what I say. So obviously, you know, it seems like quite complex. You've got to pass through all certain different avenues.
I think the one thing as well that we need to touch on is the fact that state laws don't cross state lines, and that's the other thing. So there is literally sort of 50 different laws for the 50 different states, or the 51 different states, or, you know, you can't have something that's based in New York and then that rule will apply in San Diego. They don't cross the lines.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and if, you know, to be quite honest, like I said in the beginning, I'm being very broad. I'm not including certain things. You know, if there's a state law and there's no federal question to it, you're not going to go to federal court. You're not going to go to federal laws. You know, that state law is still going to trump. But, you know, just generally speaking, you're going to have a bunch of different laws. And if it's a question of federal law will win.
Right. So in regards to this, while we're on this subject, we've obviously know these lawsuits out up against Ripple. And I believe, to my understanding, have they been pressed to a federal sort of lawsuit now? Has it been from state law to federal? Because what I'm trying to get at, Jesse, is if Ripple have got these lawsuits against them for whatever reasons, you know, for the security issue, for example, if XRP is not declared a security from the federal law, does that then obviously branch out for all states? Do they have to adhere to that law, or do they then have to rewrite their own individual version that sort of corresponds with the federal law? So what I'm basically trying to get at is, if any court case is ruled for any decision about, let's just say XRP is not a security in federal law, is that then the law throughout the land, is what I'm saying?
It is if... So that's a really tough one to answer, because, you know, like I said, if you're just transacting within states, you can just follow that state's laws. But the second that, you know, you're going beyond state borders, the second that, you know, Fidelity is located, I don't actually know where they're located, but let's say New York. I don't know where their headquarters are, but let's say New York, and then, you know, their clients in California. The second that happens, now you're dealing with, you know, you're transacting outside of, you know, an individual state's borders. So, I mean, realistically speaking, when you're talking about all of this, it's going to be federal law. It's going to be federal law that sets this, and the states are just going to follow. They're not going to be less restrict, or they're not going to be more restrictive.
Just following up on what Kurt was saying, Jess, I think he's referring to the fact that Ripple were very clever when they moved it from a state court to a federal court, because a federal ruling, even if individual states bring up additional lawsuits, they can always state the precedent of the federal ruling against that particular lawsuit.
Exactly, yeah. And in bringing it to federal law, you know, to federal court, also, it sets a tone for the country, in a sense. Yeah. You know, than just the California ruling, or than just the New Jersey ruling, or just the Texas ruling, you know, whatever. It's having a ruling in federal court is much better for the sake of the country.
Yeah, and that's exactly correct, Simon. That is exactly what I was trying to imply. Because obviously, you know, with how things are slowly rolling with the US, you know, this is just a nutcase conspiracy what I'm about to throw out here. But, you know, it may well could be Ripple themselves. I know it sounds really backwards, but, you know, if the dispute is it a security and the US aren't doing something, do you think that this is maybe something that that could be done to quicken that process?
Can I add something just off the bat here, right? I know everyone's saying that this is really slow and this isn't taking a particularly long time.
No,
in my opinion.
Yeah, obviously I understand. I mean, like you say, you've been in this space a lot longer than me, Simon. But I have seen.
No, it's not that. I'm talking about precedents for other things as well. When it comes to making laws and getting stuff passed, it is always a very, very long-winded process.
Of course, yeah. It's just that I can remember seeing some stuff in Congress about cryptocurrencies as far back as 2014. Now, one could argue 5 years may potentially be, adequate time to maybe, sort something out. I believe it was last year. I think we've got a video on our YouTube in Parliament, and I think Ryan Zagon's there if you can remember that, or if people can recall that. And I think we're coming up to a decision now in the UK. So if you want to put in comparison, let's say the United Kingdom started acting in 2014, the same as the US. We're at the back end of this decision now. We should have some sort of definition for exactly what digital assets are. And I think that's coming up in, is it April or June or May something, is that, Simon?
The public offering period for the UK Parliament ends in April, and they are expecting to launch something by the end of May, beginning of June, is what they're stating. But the important thing is they've already issued tax guidelines and they've already issued other guidelines around it. The only regulations that we are really waiting for is the regulation of the actual, I think, the exchanges and how to make the investment vehicle safe. And I think that's sort of globally. But I think where America and where the rest of them, they're literally sat waiting for other countries to launch their regulations because they want to see if those regulations work before, because they've got the biggest capital market. They're always going to be the last to come to this game because their impact will be considerably bigger. Yes, it was discussed in 2014 because the second Bitcoin came about and the second the rest of them came about, there was money that was held in an asset that wasn't controlled within the banking system. So it's going to be discussed right off the bat. And that is the problem with this P2P network, so to speak, is you have got this, it's a complete 180 because at the moment you have got this complete centralized system that they have complete control over. And relinquishing that so the world still works, it's very important to get it right. So it's not taking time. It's essential that they get this right because if they get it wrong, then not only will it not avoid a financial crisis like in 2008, it will amplify it by 60,000 times because you're going to get people running ICOs, you're going to get people running security offerings, you're going to create the absolute abundance of debt from something that they physically can't control because it is decentralized. So they have no control over it. So they have to get the regulations spot on from the start. And America's the most important one because they've got the biggest capital market.
Yeah, I fully agree with that in that regard. I think most importantly, it's all the anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism that is probably the concern. You've heard it before from Christine Lagarde and from Mark Carney, and potentially the reason why ETFs have not been approved is just because of I wouldn't regulate the market. In fact, I've actually got a snippet here. It's from the paper that Simon's just talked about, and it says the lack of regulation is one of the things preventing crypto assets getting to a mature stage. We know for a fact that there is a huge demand for the provision of much higher levels of liquidity to markets to stabilise the price. The only reason they are not entering the market is because the play is not regulated and there is not appropriate regulation in place. If there was regulation in place in a jurisdiction such as the UK, with such a strong financial and technology base, we would see a massive influx of inward investment and businesses not only migrating to the space but to expand the space. So that's a clear message. Obviously this is drafted from the UK government to a degree as well, and I think that just definitely illustrates the absolute need for regulations, which is why we're doing this live stream today, just so people can really fully understand exactly. At the end of the day, what this is basically saying is, without the proper regulations, we're going to be restrained to where we are now in regards of, investments coming in, as Jesse was mentioning before, what they call over there, your pension funds, Jesse.
IRAs, 401ks.
Yeah. So obviously, like what we were saying before, is banks can physically buy digital assets for themselves, But when it actually comes to investing other people's monies in all these different financial instruments, it is regulations that's preventing that. And this is where the institutional money is. It's not the actual players themselves. It's the money that they're managing that they're restricted to actually investing in this space. So again, you know, it's all about regulations. And so far, I mean, I don't know if this is boring everyone because it's regulations, but I think we've done very well covering a lot of the stuff so far, and I think it'd be very insightful for people to actually understand the importance of regulations. A lot of people are saying all this good news and nothing's happening to the price, but you know, to a degree, why are you going to get this influx of money coming into the markets when it's regulated and potentially unsafe? So I'll just shut up there moving forward anyway.
Yeah, it seems like everyone in the comments is happy. You know, some people are still trolling, but you know, just if I can add something that I forgot to mention that I just thought about, you know, regarding U.S. laws. If it does get to the president's desk, if any kind of token taxonomy, crypto-related bill, I think his new chief of staff, you know, I think it's the chief of staff. It could be somebody else, but I think it's the chief of staff is very pro-crypto, you know, and that's somebody who's going to be in his ear. And Trump, by him, I mean Trump. So that's an important thing to know, that even if the bill does make it to Trump, you know, regardless of what anyone thinks his opinion is to begin with, he has a very pro-crypto chief of staff talking to him.
Yeah, and especially when you think of Donald Trump as well and his background, where he's come from with business. To my understanding, you've heard about, you know, Corey Johnson saying that, you know, with the White House's connections there with Ripple. I'm sure that there is, considering they're a US-based company doing exactly what they are doing in this space. For me, Donald Trump must have some understanding of what's going on here. He must have his own personal input. I know people could say he's got bigger things to worry about, but if you actually look at the bigger picture of this and the actual paradigm shift that it could create, you know, I believe it would be up there in regards of, you know, highest of importance in regards to, you know, we're talking about a new monetary system potentially, you know, being sort of implemented worldwide. Yeah, we're years and years off. I can understand this, but, you know, to have that starting edge at the start, you know, to be involved at the start rather than sitting back, I think I'd like to think Donald Trump will be taking this opportunity with both hands, and even though people argue about the executive order, depending on how things move forward in the future, if it is taking 2 years, then potentially could be something that it does execute in with the power that he's got, maybe. I mean, that's just my
I could see it.
That, Jesse, obviously, you know.
I could see it. It's possible. You know, I don't think it's going to happen any time in the near future. But then again, you know, I'm not really tapped into the financial economy. You know, Simon and you understand a lot better than I do, you know, where we really are when it comes to liquidity and things like that. Wait, can you just say liquidity one more time for me?
Liquidity.
There it is. So you're a little more tapped into it than I am. I could see it happening if we really got to that point. But I don't know about before then, to be honest. You need a good reason.
What are your thoughts with Trump? He's a businessman. He can make this happen for America, in my eyes. So when I look at it, you know, it'd be... I think
he has an opportunity to leave a legacy when it comes to the financial markets at the moment. If the crypto sphere, should we say, is launched and mainstreamed while he is in-house. Now, me and Jesse talked about this. We can both sort of see him winning another term anyway. So, because I can see him winning another term, but he wants. I don't think he's a particularly, you know, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but every president wants to leave a legacy of some description, and they do. Now, you know, everyone's focused on the wall and all the rest of it. I do believe there'll be some sort of barrier in place. I do believe that something will come of this, but, you know, I don't think it will be exactly what he wants, but I think it will be a happy compromise between some sort of fixed structure that they can defend, or, you know, all the rest of it.
I think we'll get a fence and they'll call it a wall.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, we'll stick a couple of wooden posts in it as well. And that'll be a bit more secure. In regards to capital markets and liquidity, that is much more important than a war. Now, yes, you're saying that I understand. I don't fully understand sort of everything about it, but I do understand that at the moment you have some companies that are very cash rich, i.e. Apple and all the rest of it, and you have the majority of companies that are very poor, sort of when it comes to actual liquid assets. Now, the problem is that with 0% interest rates, as Kurt's been saying, and blah, 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 there has been the printing and the lending of money with zero return. So they are printing money into existence to lend, so to speak. And while the heavy demand is still on the dollar, around about 60% of trade, I think the last report was around about 56% actually, but
yeah, I think it has dropped a little bit recently, Simon.
Yeah, so I think it stands at around about between 50 and 60% of the world trade is on the backing of the dollar, and it's too much for a pegged currency to sustain anyway, which we all know. But you've seen an awful lot of volatility in the markets recently with the Dow Jones, with the Nikkei, with the and the only thing that causes that sort of volatility in any market is a lack of liquidity. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing it everywhere. I think I'm going to touch on this now because it's really important that people understand why crypto is being... I don't necessarily think it's being suppressed. I just don't believe it is actually gaining any capital investment because there is no capital, there is no liquid investment to put into crypto. And at the moment, liquid investment is the only way you can invest in crypto. Now, there is a couple of futures contracts, but there is not many of them. There certainly isn't enough to make a dent in the actual market caps or all the rest of it. So the only way that you can physically invest in crypto now is if you take your money, your cash, and you invest it into crypto. Now, there isn't a great deal of cash floating around, apart from, as I say, there is a couple of companies that are pretty cash rich, but the majority of companies are sort of, I would say, between 2 and 5% of their net worth is liquid. The rest of it is on borrowings and debt and all the rest. Now, when it comes to what's coming in the future, which is what I think Donald Trump and the rest of them are working towards, they are working towards a way of making a liquid global asset. So for this example, we are going to use XRP, but they're going to use it with hard assets. So at the moment, we've got liquid assets and we've got not liquid assets. So stocks are sort of in the middle. They're classed as a liquid asset. You can turn them around pretty quick, probably 2 days, cash them in, sell them, put it somewhere else. But then you've got a building which might be debt-free, but what you're going to do with it is bricks and mortar. So you can borrow against it, but at the moment you can't really borrow because they are raising interest rates and it's considerably more than you actually paid for the building, so you are actually losing money on your borrowings. So it makes no sense. Now, if you could issue that liquidity somewhere else or in another form, i.e. a security offering, and when we're talking a security offering, we're talking that anyone can apply for. At the moment, you've got investment vehicles that you can only, you're a minimum of $1 million buy-in. Me and you couldn't even dream of touching that. So, but when you've got something that you can literally put pennies into, and 1 billion people can put pennies into it, that's when you're talking about what they're talking about with the security offerings and the tokens and all the rest of it. So they are protecting their capital and their liquid markets at the moment, and it is very important that they do that, because if they don't protect those markets, it's going to cause issues. And, I think that's what they're trying to fix, and I think they'll do it. And I think, between, as Jesse said, there is a few pro-crypto in the White House now. What?
No, sorry, you were breaking up and I thought we lost you. Do continue.
No, sorry. There's a few pro-crypto people that are in the White House. There is one which is the new chief of staff. So, which, he's probably he's probably the person that the actual president spends the most time with, if I'm being perfectly honest, I think. Is that right, Jess?
Sorry, what?
The chief of staff's probably the person that Trump spends the most time with.
Yeah, I would assume. Other than the vice president.
So, they don't see each other that much.
It depends on their relationship, to be quite honest.
They hate each other.
Do they actually?
They always pick somebody they hate because
That's
they don't
fair.
want them to be in office. Yes,
That's fair.
You be my vice president, and there we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that. So there's a real fine balance at the moment. There isn't a great deal of liquidity in the markets, but that's not just in America. You look at Japan, you look at all the markets. They're prone to some severe volatility, which is a lack of liquidity, and that's the reason it causes it. There is some other serious strains at the moment. There is things going on, and there is ETFs that are being called into question, and there is also an incredible amount of lawsuits, an incredible amount of suits being brought against banks at the moment, and that's going to unfold more throughout the year. So and there's Jesse, what's coming up in the US?
When you say
that, all the heads of banks, they've got to go in front of a hearing, haven't they? So Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, they've all been called into some sort of...
Yeah, I think I know what you're on about there, Simon. I think it was the Treasury Department from the US. I just sort of sit down meeting, whatever you want to call it, with 6 banks, and I believe those 6 banks are actually the banks that own the Federal Reserve. And it's funny you say that, because after this meeting that actually happened with the Treasury and these banks is where Donald Trump issued on Twitter his buy order, and ever since that point the markets have literally gone upwards. So
no, you're talking about the payment protection team. I'm not talking about that.
Right, sorry, my bad.
There's one that's coming up. They are being called to represent themselves in front of a committee, but it's the head of all the banks. So there is something there, but I don't quite know what it is. I haven't done anything on it. I've just read it somewhere, so I can picture it, but I can't remember it.
Yeah, same. I don't remember.
Yeah,
it sounds important anyway. If it's got all the heads of the banks all gathering up for a nice little gangbang, if you want to call it that, and I'm sure it's something.
No, it's a reprimand. It's an exploratory hearing. It's, you know, why it's sort of post 2008 when they were grilling sort of Goldman Sachs. It's that sort of thing. Because at the moment, JP Morgan have been accused of
you get a lot of the manipulations in the metal markets.
Manipulations in the metal markets. Goldman Sachs have been massively caught out in Malaysia.
And Deutsche Bank actually they got in trouble for messing up with the Volcker rule last year too.
Yeah. I forgot about that. Good call.
There's a lot of it going around at the moment, especially with the metals market. And again, I think just touching on what Simon was saying before, if you do, I mean, gold recently over the past week or so has actually been getting gains. Nothing spectacular, but a lot of the economists that I do actually watch on YouTube, a lot of them happen to be metal shillers, so they are going to completely rip the economy apart, just for their own personal gain to a degree. But in regards to like the gold market, though, I'm hearing that there's a call for suppression in there as well. They're suppressing prices with ETS, paper worthless gold, if you want to call it, and central banks are now buying up at record sort of speeds. To be fair, and there is a lot of these banks that have been getting in trouble for manipulating these markets. So it's hard to say why is crypto at the price of what it is today. And I definitely believe there's an external force out there that's suppressing this market.
There is definitely some market suppression going on.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like I said,
we don't know to what extent, but I also think there is also a lack of liquidity, and that is the only way that you can invest. There isn't any other investment products into crypto, so I don't think it's massively heavily suppressed either.
Yeah.
I just think there's a lack of tools to actually increase the value, which are the tools that are being built as we speak. So.
Yeah, it's things like I touched on before. I don't know if I should send you the voice note, Simon, but I mean, let's just run this scenario past us now. With all this good news we get with R3, SBI, all this stuff. Let's say it all eventually goes live, and then before you know it, you've got $2 trillion running into the crypto markets. That's going to be a sort of a systemic risk to the traditional markets, I'd like to think. Let's call it a run on the
I don't think it's going to be a systemic risk, because I don't think the capital is going to come from traditional markets.
Right.
Which is what I'm talking about with the tokenization and the security tokens and the offerings. The capital will come to crypto, but it's going to come from a creation of a new liquid market, not an existing liquid market.
Right. So that was absolutely epic. But we've got one last little thing here. We've been going for a while here. Are you guys happy carrying on? It's been like an hour and 20 minutes.
I'm having fun.
So am I.
I'm quite warm, actually. It's like -5 outside, and I'm 23 degrees in my car. I'm quite happy.
Right. No, it's right. So what I'll move on to now then is this next little section here is another bill, I believe, Jesse, if you've got it in front of you.
Yeah.
Bill to promote fair and transparent virtual markets. Now, just a little brief oversight to it. It appears that they try to put regulations in position to prevent the market manipulation. So it's a great time to sort of bounce into this topic here. But I don't know if you want to give. Have you looked into this, Jesse? I believe have you had a little look into it, or is it sort of just being dropped on your lap? Is there anything you want to say about this yourself, or?
Yeah, no. So I have looked into it, and just so everyone knows, right now, like I said before, there's kind of 5 bills that I've been able to find that are in front of Congress, in the House specifically, that have to do with cryptocurrency, and 922 is one of them. I think that's what you're looking at right now. 923 is another. It's promoting U.S. competitiveness and evolving global virtual currency marketplace, something like that. But pretty much at the end of the day, when it comes to 922 and 923, I haven't been able to find any kind of any text yet, so I can't really say what it's going to say. But pretty much it seems like when you look at it, they're trying to figure out how we can set standards to prevent price manipulation, to prevent whatever issues are happening with cryptocurrency right now, and also they're trying to set standards, do some research into how we can evolve our marketplace, how we can have better laws that are in place. When I look at the way that these are titled, to promote, it makes me think that what they're going to do is, when you look at the text of the law, it's not actually going to have law on it. It's going to say, this law appoints this it creates this committee, and this committee is going to look into X, Y, and Z. They're going to lay out everything they're going to look into, and that's what it looks like these laws are going to do. But there are other laws that have been presented. There's, just so people from home know the numbers. There's HR 56. It's a Financial Technology Protection Act that was introduced in early January. It was actually passed the House on the 28th, so now it's in the Senate committee. The point of that was to establish a task force to combat digital currencies, their use in terrorism. Another bill like that was introduced this month, or January. We're not in January anymore. Another bill like that was introduced. It's called the Homeland Security Assessment of Terrorist Use of Virtual Currency Act. That's HR 428. That one passed the House as well. It's in the Senate committee. There's HR 502, which is a Fine Trafficking Act, which is basically, about the use of virtual currencies in trafficking, in sex trafficking. That passed the House as well. And then you have 922 and 923, which I think are really, they're going to pass, in my opinion, and it's probably just going to set a group of individuals who will look into it, who will look into what kind of regulations can we put in place, or what concerns do we have so we can draft the appropriate regulation.
Yes.
I think that the majority of the bills that are, as you say, with the Senate now, are giving the authorities the tools, because at the moment there is an awful lot of law that allows the seizure of bank records, the seizure, and I think these are the laws that are being passed that allow the government to utilize the blockchain to track and to source, to legally sort of combat what they can do with the cash markets now. Yeah.
So, also, I noticed in the comments, number one, Demore, I do love Waffle House. But there's somebody...
What's Waffle House? I've seen that, and I thought it was a Swedish joke, so I didn't really want to say anything, but I've just seen, what's Waffle House? Is it an actual thing?
Yeah, it's just the place where you can, we call it
waffles. All right, I'm with you.
Best waffles in the world. They do it with caramel peanut
Let's
stuff
go
as
for
well,
a waffle.
So good.
Yeah, but somebody named the Warrels within asked, when do we know if when the bills have officially been passed? So, the best indicators are just Twitter and the news. But if you want to check into the bills yourself, I've given you the numbers 56, 428, 502, 922, and 923. Kurt, if you can click on actions, it's right next to text. It's when you go to the bill.
Shall I go? Yeah, on the bill. So
do you see those little tabs? You click on actions.
Yeah, I do. But this is just introduced the house. This one.
Yeah,
I think it might be better if I go on this one. I think people get a. So obviously, what Jess is doing is basically, if you go on to this is basically to show you what bills are currently in sort of proceeds of being discussed. But if you click on actions, they'll tell you. So obviously, this one says the same, introduced the house. So that's its status currently, I believe, is what Jesse's trying to say. And I think if you do keep following it, it may proceed from introduced to House, introduced to Senate. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, so if you can click all actions, you see how it says active overview.
Yeah.
Click all actions, at least for this bill.
Yeah,
I mean, there's not going to be many actions, but if you can, I don't know if you can go and click all actions, just down one more.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. If you click that, you can see it was introduced into the House. It was referred to the Committee on Financial Services, which I said is, Maxine Waters is the one, who's in charge of that. You'll see that those are the actions that happen. Now, for the ones that were actually made it through the House, you'll see more steps. They were introduced, they were brought back to the floor, they were voted on, blah, blah, blah. Now they're in the Senate. So if you know the numbers, you can keep checking into it. They generally update about a day late. They're not on time. But so that's why I say, if you follow the right people on Twitter, if you follow the congressman, especially, Davidson, Soto's really the guy to follow. If you follow him, I can only imagine that if something this big of a breakthrough goes through, he's going to tweet it immediately. So you'll find it on news medias first before you really find it here.
Right, so yeah, so I put this as an individual bill. Obviously, Jesse's got much more knowledge to obviously the current standings over there. So he's obviously give you a selection of other bills, maybe if you want to look into. Obviously, he's listed out the HR number, I believe that it is. So just a quick one while we're speaking about the lobbying members. Obviously, I made a video on this not too long ago, Saving America's Internet of Value, Globalization. That obviously it's got Ripple, Polysign. Again, if you think of Ripple and the XRPL ledger, David Schwartz and Arthur Britto, it's the same two people that are involved in Polysign, and especially people that love a crypto. We believe that this is going to be sort of an integral thing moving forwards with digital identity and obviously custody of assets, maybe on an institutional level. But as you can see, this is a group compiled together of Securing America's Internet of Value, and they're actually part of a lobbying group. Now, obviously, I understand a lot of these laws have probably been in discussion regardless, but do you believe that this is having any effect over what we're actually seeing? Because we do seem to be seeing a lot of bills being presented as of recent, and I believe this was announced maybe 2-3 months ago, I believe, if off the top of my head. So do you think that this is actually having any impact, you know, because I believe that what I've read, obviously, I'm only going off article that I've read, but I believe that has sort of substance to it, that they're actually lobbying with XRP. So, you know, maybe approaching congressmen. I don't know how it works in America, but in my head, it's to a degree, you know, obviously we've got this group here now. Maybe, is it the congressmen themselves that present bills, Jesse? Is it the more that you get that presenting? I don't know, again, I'm just speculating.
Yeah.
Here. But so, do you think this has had an impact, or do you think that this would have happened regardless? I mean, I suppose it would to an extent, but it does seem to me like Ripple is sort of trying to push stuff in this direction, especially in the United States. You know, obviously specifically from that Ryan Zigone video. I think it's imperative from the way that Ryan Zigone was saying it, that it is a case of saving America's Internet of Value. So I don't know if you've got anything you want to speak about in regards to this.
Yeah, so definitely, you know, lobbying in America is huge. You know, I think that the bills may have been introduced with or without lobbying, you know, or without lobbying, I guess. But the thing about lobbying is it's not just about getting bills introduced. It's about the certain terms, you know. So just so you know, like you mentioned, this lobbying group, I think I looked into it. I think they're getting 10,000 XRP and $10,000 a month. That's how much the group is getting. And, you know, what they do basically is they talk to the right people. They put money in the right pockets. And they get words into certain bills. You know, if you remember when I was going over the token taxonomy, I said, look, when they defined digital token, the first thing that popped out in my mind was XRP. And then, you know, when we're, and you know, that's got Ripple written all over it. When you're talking about the Investment Advisors Act, you know, being changed to include custodial services, you know, the first thing I thought of, even though I forgot the name, was Polysign, you know. And I didn't even realize they were in this coalition. I guess I didn't pay enough attention to your video, or I just didn't understand you.
Better be going back. I'm sure your dad was listening out. Jesse's dad.
Yeah, he does.
I know Jesse's dad's got my back, Anna.
He does. So, you know, and the thing is, it's things like Polysign being involved that might have that language might be there just because Polysign was in there, and the language defining digital token. Ripple could have really had a good say in what language they were going to put into these bills. So yeah, it's huge. Lobbying is, it's fortunately and unfortunately a huge part of American legislation. You know, it's unfortunate
what I was
because
talking about earlier when I got cut off with the backhanders and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
The important thing that Jesse's brought up there is the actual figures. Yeah. Because they are being paid $10,000 and 10,000 XRP per month for this lobbying campaign. And a typical lobbying campaign runs into the hundreds of thousands. So there must be some optimism on the value of the XRP, which they have already stated that they are not going to disclose until they sell it. And I think that's the important thing. And the other important thing to remember about Polysign is, if you forget David Schwartz for the time being and you forget Arthur Britto, but if you look at the CEO of Polysign, he is an absolute mammoth when it comes to the American capital finance markets. He's not a custody person as such. He's not a crypto person. He is a mammoth of finance overall.
And exactly, and especially with Polysign, like, yeah, it does actually say here with custody solutions. I've read into regards of digital identity. Again, it's custody that the world needs, really, and I think we spoke about in the past, Simon. You know, if you want to call it destroyed through losing your keys, or for example, the banker that died that had a billion XRP.
I don't think PolySign's necessarily a custodian of crypto as such.
Do you think it's a way of tracking the masses to a degree?
I personally feel PolySign is a custodian of your digital identity, whether it's your passport, your crypto keys, because there is a massive threat which we've covered before in an email from Arthur Brito in 2011 to crypto. It's just come about again. Actually, it was highlighted yesterday, which is the fact that a CEO of a Canadian exchange has apparently passed away. He has the keys for the cold storage, which amounts to $180 million, and nobody can access it. Now, the biggest threat to crypto is the fact that you cannot access it if you lose your keys. And I believe there's going to be rules and regulations in place when it comes to institutional investments. Jesse touched on it earlier, where they can't custody their own assets. Now, I think they might be able to custody their own assets, but I think they will have to have an external custody solution for their keys to their assets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like you say, I mean, that's my biggest threat, Simon. You know, obviously you got to convince me with Revolut. You know, a lot of people will say because you can't send your XRP in and out, you don't own it and all that. But for me, you know, that's exactly something that I require, really, a custody service. We haven't even got them for the retail regard. I mean, I can't really speak in regards of an institutional level because obviously with NDAs you don't know where we're up to until it fucking happens in your face. But especially from the retail side, there's nothing really there for anybody is in regards to protection, like you say, losing your keys, and obviously for the impact.
If I was in Andreessen Horowitz and there was a hedge fund that came up and they were asking for $1 billion investment and they wanted me to park 100 million somewhere, I'd want to know that it was safe, it was secure, and it was recoverable. There is going to be no institutional mass investment into crypto, no tokenization. There will be nothing until this issue is resolved.
Yeah, definitely.
At all.
Definitely.
Nobody will put hundreds of millions into something that they cannot get back or they cannot recover if their custodian loses their keys, dies, passes away, or whatever. There will be literally nobody that will put money into it.
So just a quick one more on this talking point. I mean, obviously, if you've listened to the full stream so far, you know, it's been like a good hour and a half talk about it. You're probably thinking that we could be a long way away from this, you know, in regards of custody, in regards of actually having legislation. But then on the other hand, on the flip side, you have got people like SBI, for example, in Japan that appear to pretty much be there regulatory-wise, and I believe they will have their own sort of custody sort of solution themselves. So what I'm trying to get at here, Simon, is if you've only got sort of, let's just say, for example, one nation that's ready to go, is this not going to be sort of a negative approach for people around the world who maybe want to put the, you know, dip the toes into it, whatever? Will they be willing to?
This is what Ryan Zagone was stating in his issue to Congress in his meeting with Warren Davidson when they called everyone. You had Coinbase there, you had the rest of it. So you have a new arms race because the country that gets this gets access to capital markets that no other country has access to. So you can become a giant overnight if it is regulatory, if you've got everything in place. Now, the important thing is that just because regulation isn't there yet, these companies aren't stopping. They are building out. They are working like it is a regulated space. It is only the investors that are impatient, or the early investors, should I say, that are particularly impatient at the moment. The companies, they're full steam ahead. They're working like it's, you know, today's another day. They're working towards the end goal, which they can see and which they know more than we do, obviously. But none of these companies are stopping. PolySign is still moving forward. They're still hiring. Ripple is still expanding. It's everything is still moving on. I mean, R3, that's a big partnership. You know, everything still moves on, even though there is no regulation there yet. Because the second the regulation comes, if their services are ready to go, then their services are ready to go. It's legal. There's the regulation. There's the custody. Everything's safe. Let's go. And that's what it'll be. It'll just be like an overnight thing.
Yeah, if I can jump off Simon on that, yeah, I know that I've kind of painted a semi-bleak picture, and he's right. It's not like we go regulation and then they start building their product. You hear Fidelity's building their product. You hear all these companies are building their product. They're getting ready. They know what's going to happen. You see these lobbying groups, the companies involved with these lobbying groups. Part of being in a lobbying group, part of lobbying is knowing what regulation is going to come out of it. You know where it's going, you know where it's headed, you know what's ultimately going to happen. If I could correct one thing that I did say earlier, because I did Google it, they're paid $25,000 a month and 10,000 XRP. Simon's point still stands. It's just a little more money, but it's not what they usually get paid for. Especially a company with Ripple with all that money, they could easily pay them $100,000, $200,000, a month and get away with that. So it's still less than I would think, but that does beg the question is, why are these people willing to accept this 10,000 XRP? Because they know what's happening.
Right, so a quick one. It's fucking felt perfect. I'm really happy with this stream because obviously, as you know, I was speaking to you before, Jesse, you get a little bit nervous, but I actually feel like I've been really content with this one, which I'm pretty glad about, getting used to it. But so we had a question earlier on in regards to Fidelity and what we've just been speaking about in regards of, our regulation is set. It's a bit of a funny one with Fidelity at the moment, and there's a lot of people saying that they can launch without permission from the CFTC, the SEC, or whoever the authority is there, and then there's people saying that they can't do it. So was there something you had to touch up on that in regards to that, Jesse? I believe there was, wasn't there, in exactly the position of Fidelity. So what we've just been saying is, we've not really got the regulations there. We've got uncertainty from the SEC, the CFTC. What are these digital assets? What are they being labelled as? But I think if you can go into it, you know what I'm on about, don't you, Jesse? When I'm talking.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So if obviously you're, I'm not going to say the expert, but you're obviously very knowledgeable in this regard. Yeah, you are. You're a fun character, mate. Even though you're a lawyer and you're probably putting bad guys in prison and stuff or whatever it is to do. But go on, yeah. So go on. Go on,
he doesn't know what type of lawyer you are, Jeff.
I don't.
He definitely doesn't.
I don't. Why? What type are you? Just, in fact, so I do. You might not want to disclose that maybe because
he writes wills for a living, mate.
Oh right. All right. So it's all come out now. So everyone who thought Jesse was a financial guru is quite the opposite now. I'm only joking, Jesse. Go on. Let's talk on Fidelity.
Actually, to be fair, right, I will say one thing in Jesse's defence before he moves on. Probate and will and all the rest of it is one of the hardest fields in law that there is because it is an absolute minefield when it comes to dealing with the states.
Oh, you got Simon's back in there, Jesse. Congratulations.
Yeah, I got some defense there.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah. There's also a lot of tax planning involved. There's cryptocurrency planning. But anyway, I practice mostly bird law. But all right. So anyway, to I guess only Americans might. You guys don't get that joke.
No, I didn't get that
it's an
joke.
American TV. It's from an American TV show. Anyway. So we went over it before, but I think it's important to go over it again because it seems like maybe some people are late to the stream. It's not that they, with regards to Fidelity, they can kind of do whatever they want. It's not like they can't move forward. The problem is it's not clearly there's no clear law. There's no we don't know if they can, and that's the real issue. They're subject to the Investment Company Act of 1940. We kind of went over that before, and if XRP, if Bitcoin, if whatever they want to hold is deemed to be a security or other investment with regards to that law, then they have to have somebody custodying the cryptocurrency for you, or the digital asset or the digital token, whatever you want to call it. They have to have an independent person, an independent company custodying it for them. And the problem with that is once you have someone custodying, what requirements do they have to meet? It's not set in stone anywhere. If you looked at the token taxonomy, we kind of talked about how they were adding in they're going to look. They said that at some point they're going to create some kind of custody requirements. They use some terms in that bill that I just don't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, the point is that it's got to be custodied some way. It's got to be by an independent party. It could be by them if they meet the SEC requirements. But regardless, there's all these requirements, but nobody really knows what they are, and that's what the issue is. They could take a chance. They can move forward however they want to move forward, and then if laws come out and it's an actual opposite of what they're doing, then they have to change it immediately, and that's the real issue. I don't think if a law passes, they're going to get, they're going to be sued or not sued. They're going to face any kind of, action for what they had done previously, unless if they lost people's assets and such. It's really moving forward. They have to be compliant from day one. So that's where the issue comes in, is you don't know what that compliance looks like. You don't know how it has to be custody, held. You don't even know if it has to be by any standards, because you don't even know if it falls under the Investment Company Act. There's just too many questions. There's not enough answers. So I don't think they go live until there's regulation, but they very much could. They very much could go to Wyoming, get some kind of approval to custody assets there, because that's part of one of the bills passed, and then just hope it works out.
Yeah, because obviously the reason why I've touched into this really is obviously in the papers and stuff, you for example, BAT has been delayed for what I read was in regards to CFTC. So what I'm trying to get at is you've got all these, if you want to call them top of the range, potential digital asset sort of exchanges coming out. You've got BAT, you've got obviously in regards to Fidelity. They're always on Twitter, they're always saying, we're going to launch in January, in December, and they're getting put back. So, are they really dependent on regulations coming from CFTC? Do you think it's something that maybe that they're preventing them doing? Because obviously Fidelity now saying that they're going to be launching on a date. Do you think it's something that we might expect to see be delayed again, which we have done with sort of BAT, for example, with them obviously operating in the United States?
Fidelity haven't given a date.
Sorry.
I believe they said something March, aren't they, that they're launching. They're doing trials currently. I think I read an article somewhere that
they put out a tweet a couple of days ago saying that they are in final testing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
They haven't issued any dates.
Right, I'm sure.
I thought they said March as well. I thought I saw that.
I've definitely seen March. Whether I've obviously got my lines crossed with it, but obviously it's going to be hard for me to find the tweet because I fucking just retweet shit all day. But
was it hoping to launch in March?
Well,
I think. In just quick Google, obviously I don't have that much in front of me, but it seems like it might just be articles saying that they're eyeing March.
Right.
So that could just be one. It could be completely wrong, or it could be people talking to people inside Fidelity saying we think March, but we're not really sure. I think regulation is going to be needed before they actually do anything. Yeah. But I could be very wrong.
No, yeah, but obviously, if you want to disregard Fidelity, it's something that BATs have openly come out. I think there's been 2 delays, if I remember right, end of December, January, and it does seem to appear that it is through regulation. So, it's one of them things, obviously, these type of articles can create FOMO in this industry. If people are leading up to thinking that you're getting a physically delivered ETF, then obviously you're going to be getting hard cash injection coming in, and it just seems like they're sort of leading the public on.
You have hit the nail on the head there with what you've just said.
Oh, thank you.
Very important
privileged, very privileged, Simon, coming from you, that mate.
It's very important that people realise that as well, because the resubmission of VanEck, which happened this week, and BAT, they are both physically delivered futures products. So there is no paper derivatives. So this is one way that they are going to control manipulation, because you cannot manipulate a physically delivered product.
Yeah, definitely. And again, that's what people are getting excited for. Obviously, all we keep hearing is Bitcoin, whether they've got XRP in the radars, who knows. But, that's definitely a step in the right direction if we want to provide sustainable liquidity to these markets, is with those type of instruments. And it's nice to see that. Let's just put this out in the open now. December 2017, futures markets come in, delivered in dollars. And ever since then, Bitcoin has literally gone down from the open day. It's just non-stop gone down. So you could argue that could be an instrument to manipulate the markets downwards. So obviously you're winning out. Let's just say, for example, if you can drive down the market price of Bitcoin while shorting it on the contract that you're going to see a return on, then it's a win-win situation, because not only are they winning on the short bet, but they can obviously buy the assets physically at a cheaper price. My conspiracy is,
but they can't do that with a physically delivered product.
Exactly, but what this is what I'm saying. It's good to see us going into that direction, rather than, for example, the CBOE futures contracts, obviously, which wasn't physically delivered, and as you can see, it can be used against the market itself. For me, Simon, I'm a conspiracy nut. I fucking love it. I believe that was the instrument that destroyed Bitcoin. That CBOE futures. If you do look at the launch date of,
I think they used it to kill Bitcoin.
Yeah, oh well, that's what I mean. As I'm saying, I mean, I don't know. I'm not no market expert, but you know what my thoughts on this are in regards to suppression, manipulation, dirty little deals. I've seen a full sort of manipulation sort of TV program with sort of evidence of when you were seeing these articles in the press, and then all of a sudden you've seen people like Jamie Dimon buying them up on the cheap. I believe.
I think just closing Jesse's off quickly, his point quickly. A company like Fidelity is not going to launch, because bearing in mind they're an $8 trillion asset management company. They are a mammoth in finance. In fact, next to BlackRock and Merrill Lynch, they are the biggest in the world. They are not going to launch a product that has no regulatory clarity. They're not.
Yeah.
Now, the promising takeaway from that is the fact that they have come out in the last week saying that they are on final testing. And to me, that sounds like they are confident that they are going to be able to launch their product in the next sort of 2, 3, 4 months. Which that's the sort of timeline I would be looking at from final testing to a live production date.
Right. Well, so there's obviously, there's a question in the comments before about it. I don't know if anyone has got any questions. If you want to start, maybe writing some over if you want anything asked from Simon or Jesse or myself. You know what? I appreciate you guys coming on doing this. It's been a nice.
What's your favourite meal, Jess? Come on, Jess. What's your favourite meal?
Oh man, I like a nice steak.
Yes, medium rare.
Nice steak and a red wine. Nothing too exciting.
Yeah, but no, you know what? Honestly, how do you feel, Simon? Do you feel like I've been a bit more myself in this one than I was in the first one?
We still need to chill out a bit more. It's still a bit formal.
Yeah, it is a bit formal, but I know. But yeah, you come from my position. I've got to try and put some structure in it. I'd love to be able to just sit back and let you guys do the show, but I've got to try.
I absolutely 100% agree with you, mate. They need structure, they need format.
Yeah, they do. Definitely do. I mean, I've got sort of a bit of a structure plan here. We've been speaking for 2 hours. It might be. I've enjoyed it, mate. I think it's a very relevant piece of content that's been made here because. For myself, I don't really know much about the US laws, but we all hear how important regulations are, and I agree with what you're saying, Simon. I do come across formal and that. I'm a changed man this year, mate. Fucking changed man.
Are you now?
No, I'm not a changed man, mate. I'm a good old Kurt. But no, but like I say, it's daunting for myself to for people listening.
I understand, and Jesse's in a similar boat to me. We spend all day talking to people, dealing with people. It's just what we do. It's harder to do it when you don't do it day in, day out, and all the rest of it. So, it's easier for me. It's easier for Jesse to come on and have a chat than it is for you to do it because it's something that you're not used to doing.
If you want to come out and have a lie down underneath a van and change a compressor, Simon, by all means, come and fucking do it with me, mate. Yeah, I'm always joking, but no, it's good.
Mate, if you want to come and sit in an office, mate, and type 60,000 lines of code to make something go yes or no, then by all means.
And if you want to write some wills for me, you can come write my wills.
No, but I don't know if you want to try and look out for any questions that are coming to your eyes. So Jesse,
yeah, there's a couple of questions.
So go on, I'll let you fire away because I'm presuming they're going to be aimed at you anyway.
Yeah, there's some people who like prime ribs. They're asking about the steak. I'm a filet mignon guy. I like it medium.
No. Ribeye, man.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. I think my dad's a prime rib guy. I forget. I think it's a prime rib. I like fillets. I don't know, man. I didn't grow up very cultured.
There's no fat in fillet. There's no taste to it.
Yeah, fillet.
No.
Okay,
man.
So realistic questions. Let's see. If Fidelity comes online with regulations, do you believe that will be the catalyst for banks to start holding assets? It's going to depend on the regulations. The Token Taxonomy Act as written, I think it would be enough for banks to start holding specific assets. I think you need more realistically. But I personally, and this is just a personal belief because I don't really know what banks are thinking, but I think it would be enough for them to potentially start holding and buying crypto. What do you think?
I think they will be limited to what type of assets they can hold. So if you're looking at Bitcoin, which is viewed as a pure store of value, I think they may still be restricted under Dodd-Frank and Volcker from investing in a store of value asset. I think if it's a utility, I think it's a bit different. So Ethereum, Bitcoin SV, XRP, the tokens that are aimed at actually being used from a utility point of view, XLM, I think there will be a different ruling for the different class of assets.
Yeah, well, it's going to go with, let's say that token taxonomy is presented and it's as is, or maybe slight changes. It's going to go with what fits that definition, what fits the definition of digital token or whatever. Those are the ones that are fine. The ones that don't fit that definition, those are still going to be a question until they better regulate and come up with better laws.
I agree.
Yeah. Right, so that's one question.
Yeah. So a question that might be better for you two, or at least you, Kurt, is what do you think is going on with the IMF and Ripple?
Right. Well, I know Simon stands on this straight away. As you can see by the reaction, I already knew he stands on it. I think. Let me just say something myself, because obviously this is a learning curve for everyone. This journey, I've come from a background with zero knowledge of finance markets, regulations. I wouldn't have even known what the Federal Reserve was back before. I mean, I would have known what it was, what it served its purpose was, the in-depth sort of understanding of the economy, all this stuff I had no clue about, and it's only because of cryptocurrency why I've obtained that sort of understanding, and especially last year when I had my penny drop moment, I'd like to think I sort of jumped the gun a little bit, is the best way of putting it. Obviously, we can see there's clear connection with the IMF and Ripple, that is 100%, but I think in regards to seeing something come to fruition, if you want to talk about your ESDR baskets and stuff, I'd like to think that this is going to be a lot further into the future. You're going to see your progression coming from the likes of your SBIs, maybe your Santanders and stuff. But I don't think the IMF are going to be touching anything Ripple XRP specifically. I think it's going to be a fair few years out into the future, and I actually don't believe. I mean, I believe the IMF may potentially hold XRP down the line if it becomes what we all think it's going to be. But I do think the IMF, if it did come to tokenization, would release their own form of, if you want to call it, an ESDR basket that could potentially run on the XRPL. And obviously, when you're hearing the stuff with Christine Lagarde, we've just done that documentary. The IMF are pro-bullish on it, but again, I think it's a sort of a crawl, walk, run situation, and I think the IMF are sort of at the back end of that journey. I could be wrong. It's only my opinion. Obviously, you're seeing stuff with like the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve Faster Payments Task Force, and I think you probably see stuff with the IMF. We've got to have some sort of systemic risk in the economy for them to issue an SDR and turn it away from the US dollar, but. Who knows? It's supposedly we're hearing about this monstrous economic cycle that we're going to be going through, where 70% of markets are going to lose value because it's all been QE, central bank issued money. We talk about de-dollarization, but I think if anything's going to step up to the world reserve beforehand, it will be the yuan. I think that's sort of the balance. What they try to do at the moment is sort of to release sort of. I'm not too sure what the word is now, trust me, I forget it, sort of to release demand from the US dollar, maybe insert it onto the yuan. We've seen all sorts of stuff about trying to go away around the US sort of monetary system with SWIFT, with sanctions with Iran. Who knows what's going to happen at the end of the day, but I think for the IMF to start stepping in and say we're going to start using XRP, I think you'll see that a bit further down the line. I think we're going to let the smaller liquidity providers, smaller SMEs first launch on it. Then we might see, tier 3, tier 2 banks roll out. And I think it's going to be a wait and see situation for the IMF. But I think they've definitely 100% got their eyes. And I think they believe themselves that this is the future, especially when you talk about financial inclusion. That's another word that's being thrown around to sort of complement this technology. The IMF have got involvement to a degree. Obviously, the high-level fintech board with Ripple sitting on it. They've got obviously some sort of correlation with each other. How far they are, we'll never know. But I don't see anything coming to fruition with the IMF at this stage. I think we've got a fair way ahead of us. Passing the microphone on to you, Simon, because I know you fucking hate the IMF and Ripple being connected at this early stage.
Right. I'm gonna stop you there, right? Because I don't hate the IMF.
No, I know you don't hate them.
They serve a purpose. I think they are, not the golden people that people make them out to be, but they do serve a purpose and they have got a purpose. They are the lender of last resort. So in the UK, our lender of last resort is the Bank of England. So when the Bank of England fails, then the lender of last resort for the world is the IMF. But just to build out on, I think people heavily confuse this, and it annoys me because every day we defend the fact that XRP is separate to Ripple, but then every day we all associate XRP's success with Ripple, and it's wrong to do that. XRP's success is not solely dependent on Ripple. We're seeing it come to light now with the fact that SBI are pushing XRP with R3, which is a direct competitor to Ripple when it comes to onboarding clients. Now, with this coming to light recently, it's a perfect example of the fact that the cordless settler at the moment, which is currently integrating GPI, but at the moment only uses XRP, their entire settler network is dependent on the success of XRP. So you've got two networks now, both blockchain-based, both massive, that are dependent on XRP. Now, when we talk about the IMF using XRP, we're not talking about them using XRP as a payment form, because that isn't XRP's job. XRP's job is a fast, global liquidity pool. That's its job. So when Ripple, when R3, when all these companies like Codius and Coil, and when all these companies start pushing the fact that they're not pushing the fact of using XRP as a payment form, because as a payment form it's just fast and it just does its job. But they're talking about the fact that it has the liquidity available to meet the demand of the service. And that's the important thing to remember, because it is completely separate from Ripple. They just want something that's got a massive form of liquidity that everybody can dip into. So every single country, every single currency, because it's global, it's fast, it does its job. But it isn't tied to any company. The idea is that anyone can use it. So if it came to the fact that 5 years down the line, the IMF needed to send an incredible amount of money to Uganda very quickly, that there would be enough liquidity in XRP for them to connect to the internet, the Interledger protocol, for the connector to source XRP as a way to transfer the value from their ESDR or their SDR. So I think the IMF will use it. I think lots of companies will use it. I don't think they will directly know that they're using it. And I will give a shout out to Michael Pinky at this particular moment in time, because he is right. The important thing on the Interledger is the connectors. When it's tapping into a source of liquidity, it's going to tap into the cheapest source of liquidity. So whatever's on there that is cheapest and fastest will win. So when they're pushing for the value of XRP, they're pushing for the value of XRP as a global liquidity source, not for an individual payment. It's an on-demand source. So some of the nostros will funnel into it, but not a lot of it. And then new capital markets will funnel into it. And yes, the IMF will use it. The World Bank will use it. The W3C will use it. It will be a standard for payment, hopefully, if it wins the battle. That's what we're talking about. But they are separate to Ripple. XRP isn't dependent on Ripple's success. It's dependent on the success of it achieving global liquidity. For other companies utilizing it, not just Ripple. It's dependent on everybody using it.
Yeah, exactly. You just nailed it on the head there with that, Simon, as well. I'm guilty of it myself. You hear something about Ripple, they've got this new massive partner. Maybe back in the day, everyone would automatically think that it was going to be using XRP, and then eventually it was using XCurrent. But you're definitely 100% right in what you're saying. There's nobody stopping anybody from actually using this network. The way I like to look at it is now, moving forwards into the future, we're going to have various digital assets that are going to be successful, and they're going to be sort of ecosystems of liquidity of their own, to some sort of extent. Now, I can remember listening to a David Schwartz sort of podcast, where he come out and he, for example, he says there's nothing stopping China coming out and backing their currency against gold on the XRPL ledgers. So although you could argue that Ripple have incubated the network, they've allowed it to grow, they've done the best to sort of allow it to tap into other markets, if you want to call it, but then again you've got R3 that are looking to now use XRP in that regard. And I think the more and more sort of developments, exactly, and I know you like Spring Initiative, Simon, and you think there's going a lot's going to come from that, but
it's just, I like tokenization in general, so I like Harbour, and I like the projects that are working on tokenization, because dependent on, at the moment, if I wanted to send, say, I wanted to send 10 Bitcoin, Now, nothing stops that Bitcoin being converted into XRP on the interledger and being sent in 4 seconds via a connector. And that's the world that we need to sort of work towards. So we need to work towards the fact that we know that everything's going to interconnect, and it's not just dependent on XRP being, it's dependent on everything being successful.
Yeah, exactly. And in that regards, you know, with the success of it, obviously, you know, it's been a good talking point recently in regards to Swift. You know, are they going to remain relevant? Obviously, the CEO stepping down. But I think the most important thing with what complements what you're saying there, Simon, is probably the most important thing isn't XRP, it is the interledger protocol. And as we know, we can move assets around on that now today, not using a digital asset. But once we have got this world that is truly interconnected, you know, maybe via the interledger protocol as the global standard, which a lot of us have thought of hedging our bets on, then that's
right. Not via the ILP is the global standard. It is the new global standard.
Well, you know, you just give me the confidence to say it that way. Obviously, we've seen numerous articles, documents that suggest it. People will still argue the point, but obviously,
there is no argument. R3 run on it, Hyperledger run on it.
This is why.
The W3C run on it. It is the new standard.
Well, that's what I'm saying, and obviously, you know, this has all come to fruition from me meeting you, Simon. So I'd like to think that a lot of the technology, a lot of the education I've got in really understanding the beast, the economic beast, if you want to call it, is interledger protocols are massive key, and obviously, you know, other assets can be settled across that network. It doesn't have to be XRP, but, you know, let's look at the condition where we are today. Like we've just been talking about, Ripple, R3. There could be numerous of other projects roll out, start implementing it. We've got the gaming aspects of things, which we don't know too much about. And I think over 3, 4, 5 years, you could potentially have 30 to 40 different innovators running on the XRPL, and I think that's the massive thing that nobody can see at the moment. You know, we're just talking about payments. Ripple are focused on payments, but the actual use of this technology, the XRPL, the interledger protocol, has got vast potential beyond our imagination, is the best way. I mean, let's go and look at the world in 20 years' time, and I can presume it'll be unrecognisable through the fourth industrial revolution, which is blockchain, AI, and obviously robotics. So I think that's me talking a load of shit again, which I'm pretty good at. But in regards to that, that's the way I see it. And it's
a very valid point. It's all correct.
It is valid
point. AI is sort of the three massive trends at the moment are blockchain, artificial intelligence, and APIs.
Right.
And they're the big things. The APIs are the connectors to all of this.
Yeah, and it's like as we were saying previously in the past before, you know, think about the world where we're going, and then think about the sort of settlement infrastructure that we rely on today. It's got to change, and I think we all can agree that, you know, behind closed doors, I think everybody knows the trick with this one now. Interledger protocol, XRP, potentially Stellar, Bitcoin, Ethereum, a load of them will do well, but I'd like to think that everybody is well entrenched into maybe the success of XRP.
It isn't just finance and stuff as well, because I mean, we're sat here with Jesse, and Jesse, how much easier would your life be when planning an estate? At the moment, how many different agencies and how many different people do you have to contact to actually find out what is held by a single estate? Would it not be so much easier for you in the future when everything is on the blockchain, everything is interconnected, and you type a name and it comes up with everything they hold in their estate?
Oh, it definitely would. I mean, I have to contact too many people. Where it would be even better is, you know, well, this is going to sound morbid, but when somebody passes away and you're handling their estate, sometimes it's impossible to locate their assets, you know, unless if you go through their house and you find bank statements to find their assets. You know, there's no place to find out what they have where, you know, and it's a pain. It really is. So it would be so much easier.
And this is the world that we are moving to, away from finance and away from, when we talk about a digital identity, we talk about, I mean, the only people that are having issues with it are the libertarians and the invasion of privacy and all the rest of it. And it's a horrible subject to cover, but I mean, if we take, it's a horrible, because there's this fine line, isn't there, between being safe and being watched, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to KYC and AML and all the rest of it, there is this fine line, and
What Simon's trying to say is Kurt's theory of financial enslavement coming to a town near you in 2020. No, I'm only joking. Like you say, it's a very delicate point because obviously, in regards of like everything that's going on with data, with Facebook sharing information, you've obviously got the Edward Snowden story, your Kevin Ship. You know, we are being surveillanced. There's no two ways about it. And
yeah, but I haven't got an issue with that. I mean, the one thing that springs to mind to me now is when it comes to data chips or data tracking or tracking devices implanted in your body. Let's take that for example. Now, we had an incident which is very famous in the UK, which was the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. It was a tragic thing that happened, and to this day, she hasn't been recovered, but it has cost hundreds of millions and an investigation. And there's pain and there's grieving and there's for the family as well. So there's loss of resources, there is grieving, there is... Now, a simple chip, which is always active, that's inserted into your body, could have put a stop to this in literally 20 minutes flat. But we don't have it. Why do we not have it? And that's my argument for it. Yes, there is the other side to it, but there's the safety side, and I would have no issue whatsoever in a device like that, which is readily available now.
Simon,
being planted into my kids.
Simon,
the mark of the beast, right?
Well,
the mark of the beast.
That's exactly it, Jesse. Yeah, and I think Simon's pitching it for the globalist on this chat. To be honest with you, mate. No, Simon. It's funny you say that because me and Scott we have a laugh and joke about this, and it was only last year we were saying I was going to voluntarily get one of these chips in my hand, basically because I wanted to go into my local supermarket and do a contactless payment with my hand, like I'm some Star Wars Jedi. So obviously for me it was more a humorous side, but if you do start speaking about these digital tracking identity, you know whether it's a chip, microchip, digital identity, you hear about all the stuff in the future. You can present your passports with it. You can have.
I was going to say, why carry your passport with you when you can just scan your hand?
Exactly, and
you know what I mean.
And I think
it annoys me when people just kick off about this sort of stuff. We're moving into a global age. And there is nothing wrong with globalization. Globalization works, but it has to work for everybody. So if it's gonna be globalization, it needs to be true globalization. It needs to be fair, even, that everyone has access to it. And that is the world that we are moving to. And that is what people need to remember. And the people that don't admit it and don't get with it, they'll be left miles behind.
Yeah, I mean, Stuart's right in the chat. We give our pets microchips. You know, we probably are going to be next. You know, whether religious people like it or not, it's going to be the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with what Simon was saying, obviously with the unfortunate situation with Madeleine McCann, but it will be those type of incidents that make it so much more apparent that it probably should be the process that we will go down to. You know, I'm not saying it's going to happen next year. You know, 10, 20 years time. It could be a thing where every single human being is
as a UK, the UK alone spends over £70 billion a year on tracking, finding this, that, and the other. Whether it's people, information, data, tax evasion, whatever. Not 7 billion. That could be eradicated. That's 7 billion straight off the bat, just completely eradicated as an expenditure for something that can be automated, and these automated processes will come, and it's just that simple. And then when it comes to kidnapping, when it comes to this, and when it comes to sex trafficking, these are the things that will just they'll eliminate it. They will literally eliminate the marketing, because there will be no trafficking if everybody can be tracked. It's that simple.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, it is a very daunting idea, especially at this point in reality. But to a degree, you know, we already are in that situation. We've all got smartphones. We've all got GPS trackers on them. You know, a lot of people that use Google probably won't realise that they can go through on Google Maps their entire history, and it'll pinpoint exactly where you've been. You know, just to use Google Maps, you have to agree to terms and conditions, and before you know it, you can see your entire history wherever you travelled throughout the past year. Now, I know that won't go to the extent of being implanted into your skin, but you know, I see it happening. I really do see it happening. It's not to do with none of the conspiracy stuff. You know, this mark of the beast which you wear. For some people,
it's globalization.
For some people, it'll be cool. You know, this sounds really funny, this, but you know, when we're all 80 years of age, you know, 50 years down the line, it's probably something the kids will want to do themselves voluntarily. You know, times move on, don't they? And when you start putting all the positives, you can have your ID in it, you can have your cash on it, you can have this, that, the other. You know, it could even have some sort of like health indicator, detect cancerous cells. There'll be all sorts of different stuff that they'll throw with it, but I don't see no other way. I think it'll eventually be a compulsory thing.
You just hit another nail on the head as well, haven't you? What if you're on your own and you're walking your dog, you have a cardiac arrest?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you know,
could send some signals.
Brightland have got a watch that you can activate that calls SOS. Why haven't we all got something in our body that can do that when it's needed automatically?
Yeah, but Simon, if I'm chipped and you're chipped, how am I going to murder you and get away with it?
Well,
you're not,
and
that's the point, isn't it? That is the point, because if you can determine a time of death, how much money is spent every year on locating murderers and killers, and you know, all this is gone, and it's wasted resources, and it is moving towards a world where you are limiting crime because people know that they cannot get away with it because they can be placed at location at time of death, and it's full and it's final, and it will just stop all of that. Imagine how many rapes won't occur. Imagine what could be prevented and not an envision. Imagine what it could do as opposed to what it is doing. So take away that, yes, you've got an invasion of privacy, you've got an invasion of privacy because people know where you are. But then take away the fact that if you were attacked, or if your family was attacked, or if your own daughter was kidnapped, would you not want to be able to recover them as quickly as possible? Would you not want your attacker to be caught as quickly as possible? Would you not want your goods returned as quickly as possible if you were burgled? There's all the benefits to it.
Definitely, but you do have to look at the other side of the coin in that, you know, if this came around years ago before we had issues with the government watching us, Facebook watching us, all these companies just basically selling all of our information, maybe you could get away with it. I definitely see the plus sides. I can see it doing so much for us. My point is the
plus sides greatly outweigh the negatives.
I agree with you. I personally do. I'm just talking about the normal normal person in the world.
Yeah,
I'm so used to just speaking about America. The normal, they look at, everyone's been using our information against us. Everybody's been watching us. So it might be a tough pill to swallow.
Again, they
say using your information against you. They don't use your information against you. They sell you a ticket, or they send you something for a kettle because you've been looking at a descaler. They don't use it against you. They just use it. It's the conspiracy nuts that say that they use it against you, that the government is tracking you, that they're going to plant this on you or do this.
Leave my Kevin Ship alone, Simon.
It's everybody that I talk to that says that, whether it's true or not, it's just the point of view that people take.
Yeah, if I could just butt in here, though, as well, see, this is the beauty of it. So me and Simon have got a neutral outlook, through our geography, our location. Obviously, Jesse, I'm presuming you're going to be going down the point people will obstruct to this happening. But then let's go to China.
I like the chips.
Let's go to China, where they've already got social credit scores now, where, we're talking about, facial recognition, all sorts of stuff like this. If you're not on the database, you can't even use trains. To a degree, I know China being the communist country, which it is, but, when you look at your WeChat and you look at all your stuff over there, I see it as sort of, if we do go down this microchipping thing, for people that are bad actors will not be able to participate in the ecosystem completely. I'm talking money, I'm talking travel, and yeah, it's very far-fetched. We've gone from fucking talking about US laws to being microchips, so, we've done very well with that one. But, in regards to it, yeah, it's, I see it coming. I do, whether people will object. You're never going to get everyone fully agreeing on it, but we're going to have these situations, where people will be saying, well, I've just lost my daughter, where she's been kidnapped. It could have been prevented, and it's always going to be that thrown in your face. You're hearing about with in regards of financial inclusion and in the aid camps over in Africa, that they're already to a degree trialing this technology. That's another little scary, chilling thought for you. I'll have to find the article for it, but obviously that was when I was looking into sort of the financial inclusion aspects of it, supplying them with a little bit of money or Ethereum. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, again, it's a little bit off topic, but it's very interesting talking points. This is the technology, this is the revolution we're going towards, and who knows how we're going to evolve. You go back 20 years.
The people that are scared of the system are the corrupt people. They are the people that are scared of the system. They are the people that don't want change. I mean, you just talked about charities. There was an incident last year. Oxfam should have provided medication. They squirreled the money away. They didn't use it. Now, if there was a financial system in place where they were given a donation to pay a pharmaceutical company for a specific amount of that vaccination, then that could have all been tracked, and they would have known that that order was completed, as opposed to not being completed and the money being squirreled away. The only people that fear change are the people that have something to lose from it.
I can't believe I've been going on for 2 hours and 15 minutes.
You know what? I know time was flown. You know, obviously, you know, we could clearly all three of us sit here all night talking shit. Whether people want, you know, again, you know, we're all in this for we're all in. I nearly said we're all in it for the technology. Then Jesus Christ. But you know, we've got an interest in, you know, blockchain, and it's the sort of things, the doors that can be opened in regard. I mean, chipping, you don't necessarily need blockchain.
The great thing about LFC is it isn't just about crypto.
No,
there's
not.
There's 900 people in the chat. There's probably only 100 of us that interact quite a lot and all the rest of it. But we don't just talk about crypto, and that's the important thing about it.
We talk about aliens, don't we, Simon? You love your aliens.
We do talk about aliens. We do talk about the lizard people. You know, occasionally we do talk about 69s and ice creams and filet mignons, and occasionally I get accused of being David or somebody else or this.
You're David from Bank of England. I know it.
Bank of England. So there's all this stuff going around that, but we talk about other stuff as well, because people do need to take just a little step back and zoom out a little bit from crypto, because these things take time. And yes, while I know that people are in at the very early stage and they haven't missed anything, and they haven't, because you are still in at the beginning. Because until the regulations and until the actual big institutional money can get involved, you're not going to see any sort of growth. And that's the honest truth. I mean, I get knocked all the time in the channel because it's gone up by 8 or 10%. Let's be honest about it, right? Who gives a shit about 8 or 10%? Who gives a shit about a couple of cents or a couple of pennies, or, you know? And everyone's looking at our all-time high will make me really happy, $3. Who
it's mooning.
Realistically gives a shit about $3? Let's be honest about it.
Yeah,
when we know where it's going.
I agree.
Zoom out of it.
Yeah, I agree with you fully, Simon. I think, I know I'm not pointing the blame at anybody here, but, you know, you've got, you know, if you want to call them riddlers and promising the fucking world overnight, and, you know, at the end of the day, you don't invest in this for tomorrow. You know, 3 to 5 years, you could look at some sort of maturity. Again, you know, it's rich me saying this here. I don't know why the fuck I've gone hyper conservative recently. It's not that I'm being hyper conservative. I think I'm just trying to be more responsible in what I'm saying. But
I'll ask you a question live, because I know why you've gone hyper conservative.
Go on.
Because I've been yelling at him all the time.
Oh yeah, because Jesse's fucking fault. No,
right. When you think about your life, when you think about who you're going to benefit, who do you think about benefiting your life?
Who do I think about benefiting my life?
Yeah. So who do you think about when, if you say, let's just say you became a millionaire.
Yeah.
What would be your first thought? Who would you be happy for? Would you be happy for yourself?
It sounds selfish, Simon. It really does, but I would be happy for myself. I'd be also happy. Yeah, I don't really want to go into this. Obviously, I lost my mum a couple of years ago. You know, maybe proving points to her to show her that, you know, maybe was the man that I always could be without being depressing. But for me, I'm in it for myself, Simon. I'm not going to lie here and say I'm in it for the tech. I'm in it to improve my life.
No, I'm not talking about yourself. You missed the point. You're not in it for yourself,
are
you?
Love for crypto, do you mean, in regards of love for crypto
itself? No,
well, your parents, your girl, your wife, you know, your baby, whatever.
Oh, right, yeah, my daughter, obviously, Simon. Yeah, obviously, of course. It's not. Yeah. We got there in the end, Simon. It's fucking getting. Simon, I've got a kebab sat next to me. It's gone freezing cold whilst enjoying this conversation. Been trying to sneak eat, having little bits of it. No, you're 100% right, and I think anybody, you know, this is a nice little speech, a nice little thing to say. You know, not everyone's got the most fortune in the world. You know, they've not had the best circumstances. You know, for myself, I'm just a normal working person. Yeah, I can get by life without crypto. But for myself, I do feel like it is a moment to embrace what could actually, you know, I'm not trying to say fucking throw all your money into it, but just think about your life and think about, you know, what do you want to do? Do you want to work for the next 37 years? Or, you know, you could potentially be working for the next 5 and then you could be retired. But this is what I'm saying, you know, don't think about, oh, is it going to moon in Q2 2019? Just think about what Simon just said. Step away. Think about the bigger picture here. You know, we're talking about an entire structural change to the finance markets to a degree. And Yeah, I'm doing it for my daughter, Simon. Obviously, you know, she's restored my life is the best way of putting it. So
we all do stuff for the people that we care about the most.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky. I know your circumstances. I know Jesse's circumstances. You know my circumstances. So we all know the reasons why we do this.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I do this, you know, because I feel like, you know, a group of people have come together and they get on very well, and you know, we're living proof for that. I mean, none of us knew each other 6 months ago. Now we can sit here and have a 2.5-hour conversation like it's water off a duck's back.
And also have 69ers with each other on a daily basis, because Jess is, you know, that's his catch-20 metaphor.
That is not my thing.
Yeah, Jess.
Come on.
What it is, Simon, is his dad's listening.
Gosh.
Oh, look at him now, you know, Mister. I bet he's dead nice to his dad and that. I'm only joking, Jess's dad. He's a great addition to it. You know, he's got a bit of humour to him. That's all that it is. But I am going to have to stop because, you know, we've been rambling on for a while.
Can I ask one more question to both of you?
Yeah, go for it.
It comes from a guy named Hugh, last name Jass.
Yeah.
He wants to know when moon.
When moon? Oh, fucking hell. I don't know, mate. I've got my money. I've got my money wedged on SBI, mate. Everyone knows my stance. Whether it happens or not, who knows? But I know Simon likes answering this question.
That's his favorite question. Simon's favorite question.
Do you want a sensible answer, or do you want to take the piss answer?
Whatever you want, Simon.
Right. I'm going to start with a sensible answer then. The sensible answer is we are currently at the key stage. There is a lot of stuff going on in the background that people aren't really aware of. So, as I have explained to you, there's an awful lot of the Ripple exchanges being partnered with some major financial backing, as in they're being brought by major financial backing. SBI is another one of those that are looking to go live in March. We have the current legislation that is coming into, which we've discussed today, which I see a good month or 2 months passing around the floor before it hits the president's desk. So let's say that's March or April before I see any of that hitting the president's desk. So I would be looking at, from an institutional investment point of view, a decent increase between May and June. When I say a decent increase, I mean returning to sort of $3 to $4. Bitcoin probably returning to between $6,000 and $8,000. I would be optimistic around about those figures in May. And towards the end of the year, I would be more optimistic towards tokenization and influx of new capital from fixed assets. So in answer to when moon, I believe the moon will start this year, but I think it will be at least 2 years before a proper full moon. My take the piss answer is shut up, you huge ass.
Right, so
that's it.
Yeah,
good night.
Yeah, right. Well, obviously, I don't really need to close it down. You've been waffling to us, talking shit. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been insightful. I know I've enjoyed it.
Love you all. Bye.
Yeah, basically. So obviously, I don't know if you want to stay on for a minute, Simon and Jesse, but I'll just close the live stream down now.